I frankly think that crisis initiation is really tough. And it's very hard for me to see how the United States president can get us to war with Iran. Which leads me to conclude that if, in fact, compromise is not coming, that the traditional way of America gets to war is what would be best for U.S. interests. Some people might think that Mr. Roosevelt wanted to get us into World War II, as David mentioned. You may recall we had to wait for Pearl Harbor. Some people might think Mr. Wilson wanted to get us into World War I. You may recall he had to wait for the Lusitania episode. Some people might think that Mr. Johnson wanted to send troops to Vietnam. You may recall he had to wait for the Gulf of Tonkin episode. We didn't go to war with Spain until the until the Maine exploded. And may I point out that Mr. Lincoln did not feel he could call out the Federal Army until Fort Sumter was attacked, which is why he ordered the commander at Fort Sumter to do exactly that thing which the South Carolinians had said would cause an attack. So if, in fact, the Iranians aren't going to compromise, it would be best if somebody else started the war. But I would just like to suggest that one can combine other means of pressure with sanctions. I mentioned that explosion on August 17th. We could step up the pressure. I mean, look, people, Iranian submarines periodically go down. Someday one of them might not come up. Who would know why? We can do a variety of things if we wish to increase the pressure. I'm not advocating that. But I'm just suggesting that this is not a either-or proposition of, it's just sanctions has to succeed or other things. We are in the game of using covert means against the Iranians. We could get nastier at that.
The United States must get involved in this fight in order to protect the United States. God bless America. God bless the United States of Israel. God bless every innocent person.
It starts with a simple question and ends in objective reality. Through our journey from there to here, we find one another and ourselves. And as the next 24 hours breaks free from our last, we gaze onward in reflection of the day.
Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up.
Saturday, June 14th, 2025. Thank you for joining me today. The escalations continue in regard to Iran and Israel, Los Angeles, No King's protests, maybe all of it as the same blob that we're dealing with today. What we started there with was something we played a lot in the past, something that you might, if you haven't seen, it's why I wanted to start with it again. I've probably opened the show with that clip over the years more than once. Today, it's especially relevant. For those that have been following along with Israel and really, the very clear overlap of Israel driving the U.S. government to fight its wars, and you can see it in the reverse. I think it's important to acknowledge that these are entities working together to, you could argue for nobody's interest other than their own at the expense of their own people. Either way it goes, I personally think it's obvious that Israel is completely influencing U.S. policy. Either way, I think it's important. It behooves us all to recognize all of the obvious overlaps, all of the obvious influence, and the writing on the wall, where this is going. And all the different narratives being thrown out, like that contradict their own statements from 30 seconds ago because it meets a certain narrative for what their base wants to hear. It's all over the place. And that clip is important because it goes back to 2012. Patrick Clausen, the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. And I argue even at that time, the internet's clearly there. We all know people are watching things on YouTube. But interestingly, or wherever, many different platforms, I think even back then, and even to some degree today, weirdly enough, but more so, there was a time when people really didn't think those things were just going to be seen by everybody. And to so blithely discuss, if you didn't get it by watching that, literally highlighting how every single war was started with a false flag, and even makes it really clear with the Lincoln point that knowing he needed that to happen, he did exactly the thing that would be needed, that would be the thing that would drive them to do what they needed to then respond. So knowing they did what would cause the reaction that they could use as the impetus. That's the way these people think. And so when you think about that in context of Israel, and that's why these people don't take the bait. whether it's Russia or Syria. But now we can see what happens even if you don't take the bait, that they will simply just rationalize and make a narrative up to justify what they've always wanted. And this is why it's so frustrating for people that have been following along, because these claims have been made over and over, or the different allegations about where their bombs are, everything from people they killed to every other week. It turns out, oh, that was a lie. That was a misrepresentation. And the one that everyone recognizes is something like Baghdadi, where both the U.S. and Israel have said, I mean, look back at the records. What is it? 7 different times. This last one seems to be sticking, but where they claim they killed him. And then it turned out that wasn't the case, or maybe that's the lie. The point is, it's just so much misinformation. That's just propaganda. That's the way the intelligence apparatus works. And so just the point is, take away from what they really think, that we need to get to war with Iran. And that's the way these people think. Now, I'm not going to argue that's literally everybody in our government. I think there's much more divide in that context today than there was previously, I guess. My personal opinion. But the bottom line is, as always, like with COVID-19, at the end of the day, they're all together when it comes to controlling your lives. They just have a different opinion on how that should go. And, I'd like to believe that I'm just a pessimist and that's not true, but I think the facts back that up. But please investigate for yourself. Don't just take my worldview. Look into these things. That clip is important. Also juxtaposed with the clip of Rabbi Shmuley, which, as far as I could tell, he's even largely ostracized from his own community because he's just an absolute lunatic. If you didn't catch it, you could argue it was a slip of the tongue, but I think that means something regardless when he says, God bless, Israel, God bless the United States of Israel. That's exactly what he says. We'll play it in a minute and we get further in the show. And I think there's a reason that that's important, whether or not it's a slip, is to understand that this is happening. It's like getting past the lie, or rather getting over the resistance from acknowledging that ISIS and Al-Qaeda, whether you think it's entirely or to some degree, it's the point that they are involved with these groups. The U.S. and Israel are funding and operate, and these are proxy elements. It shouldn't even be contentious to say this anymore. There's many high-level journalists that have done great work over the years just breaking this down. James Corbett, one of them. Ben Swan did a documentary tying it right back. It's objectively clear. So my point is, in all that same point, let's stop hiding from the obvious that Israel's government is using all sorts of tactics to manipulate the U.S. government. And frankly, governments all over the world and most of the peoples of the governments around the world are seeing that today. And I think that's why a lot of this is happening. But keeping all that in mind, we're going to make some points to start about that. But we're going to talk about quite a bit today. Some very important, actually, developments that I think not everyone's really focusing on. But we're going to start. I'm going to show you one in a second, right? Just to get you kind of whet your appetite for where we're going with all of this. But we're going to start today ultimately with the immigration, I guess, is the best way to frame it. And this is about I thought it was important to start with a quick point about Trump's rapid kind of change because of obvious things I'll point out. But not because that's the focus of today, but I think because everything we're discussing in a weird way seems to interconnect with that point, or rather that's being used to rationalize X, Y, and Z, whether it's the protests, whether it's both either LA or the No Kings, which is kind of the same conversation, and the conversation of immigration and how that's being used, how that overlaps with Israel and the weaponized immigration and migration to this country, and all this stuff overlapping. It's very important to think about. So I wanted to start with that to show you how contradictory it all is. If the whole point is about stopping all this and Trump's now essentially allowing it, have we lost the plot? It's important to highlight that doesn't make any sense anymore. It shouldn't just be emotion driving your actions. We're also going to talk about the very important, interesting development around Minnesota. Now, at first, I kind of thought I saw this morning and I saw it's too bad people got shot. And I didn't really place it in something that was going to be necessarily a focal point of the show. But as this developed, it definitely feels very off. Just to put it point blank, it has all the hallmarks, so it doesn't mean it is, but my opinion would be yes, but all the hallmarks of some kind of operation. It's not as simplistic as you might think of saying, oh, he was tied to this guy. There's a whole waterfall of information that's all over the place. It's being discussed everywhere of what the groups he's connected to. And this is a guy who appears to be a Democrat. He's the suspect, by the way, before we get into it all. Everyone's already choosing what the court of public opinion is horrible, but he's a suspect and he's a Democrat, as we're told, and he shot multiple Democrat lawmakers. And the story is really interesting when you find out he's tied to what's called the I don't know if I'm saying that wrong. Praetorian Guard. I'm just saying like I'm saying it wrong. In regard, the name is from Rome and the kind of the Emperor's Guard, but that's a group he worked for that did security contracting in the Middle East, in Gaza, in the West Bank, in Lebanon. Seems pretty interesting to me. And then he worked for a company called, or ran a company called Red Lion Group, which is right now on the online being conflated with a whole bunch of things that aren't that. I'll point that out when I get there. Like Red Lion Control is one that isn't the same company, but it's being conflated all over the online right now. Just question everything. The point is, all of this points to some really interesting things. I mean, usually you get people that are taking it as they, applying it as they want it to fit in. This is a Democrat that's, I think the first part is really that it's a false flag idea, that this is them trying to frame the Republicans. It could work either way, quite frankly. I'll show you where I think the evidence lies, but it's very clearly something is the way, from what I can see. It just doesn't add up to me. And if he dressed like a cop, he drove up in a cop car, some version of one that looked like that. It doesn't seem to add up from either side, quite frankly. So I'm of the mind that I think it's something larger that fits in with the nonpartisan thing that's happening. We'll come back, we'll go through all that and give you all the details so you can understand what's happening there, at least up until we started the live show. And of course, we're going to talk about the LA discussion, and rather the protest, no kings, and some interesting developments around the Capitol. I just feel like there's so many contrived kind of just, you know how today we make fun of like the movie industry, they just can't make up new ideas. Well, kind of think that's just because it's all wrapped around intelligence and the government, and they're all the same thing. Like they just can't make up new stories. So you have no more Capitol barriers being rushed and running, and it's like just weirdly timed, right? And we'll go through all of it. Maybe it's organic. It doesn't feel that way to me. And then we're going to talk about Iran and what's going on with Israel, which I think is really interconnected to a lot of this. I mean, really think of the major things that we're almost not talking about right now. The genocide in Gaza and the extension of it in Lebanon and Syria, this massive Patriot Act 2.0 Palantir development that is literally as obvious as it gets, and it's just, and what's crazy is the stories we're covering are also very big stories. And, we'll cover it. I'll point to things I think connect to it today. And as this story continues, we'll go back to that and cover it. But what happens with most partisans is that just becomes the ongoing tunnel focus, and we just put those things behind us. I think that's part of the design. But we're going to talk about the overlap of this discussion with the protests and how weirdly they kind of overlap with the Mexican flag discussion, and even like the color overlap and the way people are applying that. It's an interesting emotional point. We have veterans and U.S. citizens being arrested by Marines. I mean, there's just no way around the obvious violation of the Posse Comitatus Act, but I guess it doesn't matter as long as you're fighting the people you frame as the other, Democrats or whatever you want to make it into be. But we're seeing the destruction of this country. And we will go over the nuclear conversation in regard to Iran, the lies around that, the massive overflow of support by all politicians. It is pretty obvious what's happening, in my opinion. And we'll go over it all again. I mean, the unending, we've been covering what's the conversation of Iran since I've been doing this. Really since I got past the point of like when earlier this platform, when I very first started this, was largely focused on cannabis law reform and different things. But when I first even stepped into foreign policy, that was one of the earliest things we talked about. And from that point to this very day, the conversation is the same. And I don't mean the facts haven't evolved. I mean, the information and how it's gone and the lies being told have just never stopped. And that's, again, why it's so frustrating for people even barely paying attention to see this, not just being told again, but being folded into borderline, nuclear-powered states attacking each other. I mean, if it's so, understanding, I'm not talking about Iran, by the way, because I think the evidence continues to show that that's not the case. I'm not saying we know that for sure. We'll go over the evidence of even Gabbard and the U.S. government telling you that's not the case, but understanding that you've got the U.S., you've got Israel, you've got other aspects, Russia, all sorts of people that could spin into something very serious. And I don't think your governments care about that. In fact, I don't think it's their choice at this point, but we'll go over all of it. So I'll start with this in general again. Just to make sure you see this, I actually clipped this out again today to make sure that it got some more reach. And he's the Washington Institute of Near East Policy, speaking on how to get the U.S. to war with Iran using false flags and other covert means to achieve this end. Very important to understand how clear that is. Now, one thing I'll show you, we'll come back to in a minute. This is just shared with me Orwell before I got it, like last half hour. Mossad planted kamikaze drone base near Iranian capital. Major covert strike reveals. This is Ynet News. This is Israeli media, which doesn't therefore prove that it's the truth. All media should be questioned, but realizing this is them reporting from their sources from the Israeli media and the Israeli government. And the reality of this is what Israel does. Just like the, well, I have it further down in the show, but I'll bring it up for illustration. It's in this, it'll be in the show notes. The pager attack, or whatever you want to call it. And this is such an important point for me around the bigger conversation, or one of the other big conversations, which is Israeli infiltration into everything. Israel's infiltration into U.S. tech in light of the Lebanon pager attack. We discussed that on September 20th, 2024, and just went over in depth the unending ways that the Israeli government has inserted itself, interwoven itself into U.S. society and others, by the way. But from the U.S. perspective, that's what we're discussing. And realizing if they can have pagers that will explode in people's hands from 10 years after they circulate them, according to them, how do we not know that's just everywhere in the world? Ask Seymour Hersh about the Samson option. He wrote a whole book about it. The reality being that Israel has a policy that should they feel they're about to be destroyed, they will launch nukes against everybody, even their allies. It's not, read about it, guys. It's public information at this point. And this is probably what is some kind of threat that's waged against everybody. My point is that you have to realize that this is the kind of mindset they have. So if you have to, if this is taken at face value, that means the Israeli government has always been planning this. It says years of planning. So that means they never had planned to negotiate. They were always planning, which is what we're all trying to tell you. And the Trump administration or the Biden administration or anybody else in the U.S. government have been in lockstep about whatever they want. Now, you can see that as I see it, but just understand those are the facts. I see it being that they're in control of the situation. We'll come back to this. Very important. Now, I'll include the full video, by the way, which that's how we roll here. 6 minutes, not that much longer, but Patrick Clausen responds to questions, full video, 2012. Oh, and here's this clip, by the way. And well, I'll just do it. It's a short clip. I'll play it again in case you missed it, which is really crazy. He says the United States of Israel, very clearly. Oh, I thought I had it right there. I guess not. Oh, I deleted it. That's right. Let me grab it again. And why this is important, guys, is because this is something that I it very well could be one of a few things, actually. It could be that this is a slip of the tongue. It could be that this is him just gloating in a way, but it also could be this is deliberate to cause distraction. Now, those are all just possibilities. In no way am I saying that we should, the problem is that people today in the mainstream alternative media side of this will tend to run with what feels right for what they think is happening. And that's, if you're reporting information, you have to do better than that. And so my point is, it is okay to consider and theorize about possibilities, but we need to be clear, or I argue we should, responsible, to make clear these are just possibilities. And then what I'll highlight is what I think is more likely. To me, it seems more likely that this is him probably just saying this, and it's the way he thinks about things. Because you see, if he says it so rapidly that it seems to me that this is just the way his mind, they call it a Freudian slip, is the way it's put. And here is him telling you, United States of Israel. Oh, I thought I'd do. Oh, there it is.
States that must get involved in this fight in order to protect the United States.
So the first point is U.S. So Rabbi Shmuley, who's called out as a crazy person to people in his own community, telling us that the U.S. has to get involved. So why in the world is he even speaking about U.S. policies beyond me? Well, I believe he's actually an American. I think he's a dual citizen. But the point is that either way, he's speaking as it from an Israeli perspective, right? And he's saying that the U.S. has to protect the United States. Now, why is that? Other than narrative, there is literally no indication that Iran has any intention of attacking the United States. There's statements made all the time from all sorts of maniacs out there. Facts are what matter to me. And we'll go over all this today. That's going to be later in the show. But the point is to understand that this is something that is wildly misrepresented. And there's plenty of honest people like Thomas Massey, for example, telling you that that's just ridiculous. The facts matter. But here's what he says after that. I'll play the first part again.
Get involved in this fight in order to protect the United States. God bless America. God bless the United States of Israel. God bless the United States of Israel. God bless the United States of Israel. God bless.
He said it really fast, so maybe he is trying to slip it in there. I mean, you decide for yourself. Either way, I think it's relevant because that is a major point of how these people view this. And I mean Zionists, very clearly. All the game, and I'll point on that note, by the way, point again to T. Snyder. I frustratingly forgot. I did put it in the show notes at the top yesterday, but it's called Conspiracy Synergy. Very much worth your time. He is somebody putting a lot of time and effort into the documentaries he's making. We just played it yesterday in regard to both me as a first part. They go over Union of the Unwanted in the second part. And just realizing that Zionism is an important part we discuss in that clip. which is that we're talking about a political organization, which does overlap with Jewish people, but it's not only about Jewish people, which is what a lot of Jews in the world are screaming about, and politicians don't care because they're not interested in the truth. They're interested in what they can use to control your life, like this person, in fact. Because let's be clear, guys, this is a politician. I mean, whatever you want to call it, I don't mean literally, but in the sense of what he does and how he, this is either an intelligence asset or a politician, just by default of how he operates. That's my opinion, not stated as anything else. Now, also, we're not going to get into this today, but just recognize that as all this is going on and all the things we're talking about, Palantir, whatever else, also the genocides are not stopping. The whole story with the flower massacre was an earlier example. Using food to trick people to murder them, or the idea of bombs that look like cans of food or child's toys they lay out. This has been well documented long before October 7th. Our drones playing children's cries so people come out to help and they get shot. All of this well documented, even by international entities. Now, the point is that they pushed back aggressively that they didn't shoot people coming for food in the recent food lines they created, right? They did, though, and it was wildly documented. Then the next day, they did it again. The next day, they did it again. And as far as I can tell, the day after that, they did it again. So 4 out of 5 days. I argue it probably happened that day. They just didn't see it. My point is 4 out of 5 days in a row, they shot people. After the first day was this whole ploy about how it didn't happen, and that's not true. And here we are again is my point. This is today. Horrific massacre was committed by the Israeli army this afternoon against starving civilians as they tried to obtain food in northern Gaza. We're looking other places, guys, and they're just literally executing people as they run to the food lines they told them to go to. There's not even a narrative, you see, because no one's talking about it. They don't need to make up a story. They're just shooting people. And it's this game of what they're doing is torturing people that they're already trying to kill. Guys, look at the area around them, right? That's what used to be called Gaza. It's just rubble and dirt and debris and illness. I mean, it's manufactured. And you have to be clear, guys, if you're not following this, this has been documented by Doctors Without Borders, by the UN, by a number of human rights groups. They're watching this take place and nobody seems to care. There's not even a word good enough to highlight what that is. It's infuriating that we have to pretend, or it's just that we have to pretend like any of these people are actually serious or actually care about anything they're doing. It's very sad. Also, as Mohammed Safa points out, Gaza is being decimated. This is also today. So right now, as this is happening, they're also just indiscriminately bombing Gaza. So it's funny how they're screaming about indiscriminate attacks that are not indiscriminate and are literally responses to what they did and are, in regard to Iran. Israel, excuse me, has killed civilians in their bombings. It's documented. I'll show you a video when we get to it. And of course, Iran is responding, which in every other context is called responding or self-defense, as Israel would pretend. And they make it about indiscriminate. But over here, at the same exact time, they are just carpet bombing areas full of civilians. They're not even telling you narratives anymore. They're not saying human shields or tunnels. They're just bombing places they've bombed 6 times already. At the same time, you understand? That's why it's so frustrating that we have to try to pretend like people out there are honest about what's happening when you can literally watch what's happening in front of you. And just one other point we're going to come back to in another show. I put off the whole thing about Palantir today. We're going to end with a part about Starlink, but it'll interconnect with future shows. He says, looks like what TLAV and Whitney Webb have been talking about for years is being made official. Merger of the tech corporation, military, and the state. Of course, Mario Nawfal talking about it like it's some cheerful development because it's whatever pro the establishment or the new fake, we're not the establishment. Meta, OpenAI, Palantir chiefs sworn into Army tech unit. Not a joke. We will be focusing on this. Today, what's going on with Iran and the ongoing potential wars and murder and genocide, we're going to cover more focused on today. But the idea that you're talking about people from different tech industries being sworn into the military, guys, how do we not see where we are going? This is what everyone, even half the Republican base, are talking about right now. And we are being played. They're turning this into a technocratic control structure right in front of your eyes. They already built the database. They already built every part of this is being put in place right in front of you. Top execs from Meta, OpenAI, Palantir have joined the Army Reserve. News that their new executive innovative core. as lieutenant colonels. And guess what it's called, guys? Detachment 201. Now, that could just be a coincidence, right? But as he rightly points out, or I thought he did. Oh, I thought it was him that said it, but somebody pointed out, I forget who now, that that's interesting. You know, like Event 201. Maybe that's just coincidence. But overall, just this idea is bonkers, guys. This is so wildly outside. If this was a Democrat doing it, do I even need to finish the sentence? This is obscene. And we will talk about this more. Now, let's get into the immigration aspect before we get into everything else that I do think is pretty relevant. We'll do this pretty quickly. The last show we did on the 13th was U.S. Israel legally attack Iran, killing civilians, and Trump's jarring immigration shift. So we go into it more there if you want to watch that after the show. Pull up first. Here's just a clip in case you didn't see it. Just kind of set this tone to understand that this is a dramatic shift away. And again, a lot of his supporters are like whiplash right now. Like, how in the hell does this make sense? But, you know, we've been trying to point that out from day one. Stargate and so on. Like, that should have been a whiplash moment, but here it is again.
Today, I put out a statement today about farmers. Our farmers are being hurt badly by, you know, they have very good workers. They've worked for them for 20 years. They're not citizens, but they've turned out to be, you know, great. And we're going to have to do something about that. We can't take farmers and take all their people and send them back because they don't have maybe what they're supposed to have, maybe not.
Like that, you know, whatever. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. Whatever, who cares, right? Like, it's this blithe answer to something they've been destroying lives over. Even less, actually. People that actually do have what they need, and they just didn't like what they said. Or they had a paper miscommunication 3 years ago. Or a parking ticket. But now it's like, you know, but they're people we like or we need for my hotels and stuff. So whatever, maybe they do, maybe they don't. I mean, it's grotesquely insulting what they're doing and acting like this is not a complete 180 for when their needs are there. And also the idea that we're just broad stroking now, just everyone in farms and hotels are suddenly not criminals. In fact, guys, I've worked in these fields. I know the overlap. That's insane. I mean, also realize that you just basically said that like 80% of our, I mean, I'm throwing out, I mean, it's probably like 40% as I understand it, just in regard to agriculture, but that's the vast majority of illegal immigrants. So they're just broad stroking this because it's people that they need. And I honestly think this was always the plan. I just didn't think it would be this abrupt and this kind of jarring, or they would have a better nuanced argument about it. But if, I mean, you know, money rules the day for this man. You know, these people may, or somebody just called and said, hey man, my $1 billion agriculture business is going to suffer. So he just said, okay, never mind. Or, you know, any number the bottom line is it's a hypocritical shift.
And you know what's going to happen and what is happening? They get rid of some of the people because, you know, you go into a farm and you look and people they've been there for 20, 25 years and they.
Yeah, all of them apparently? He just makes the singular frame of one person he talked to and now represents all farmers, which I'm letting the cat out of the bag. That's where this is going. I'll show you the thing next. They're now reporting all of them. Hotels, farms, no good. They're off. We won't go after those now. Well, they lied to you guys. The evils of illegal immigrants like Stephen Miller and Noam and Bondi with these kind of bombastic arguments, these hyperbolic claims about how they're all rapists and murder, and here we are.
Worked great, and the owner of the farm loves them and everything else, and then you're supposed to throw them out, and you know what happens? They end up hiring the people, the criminals that have come in, the murderers.
Yeah, every time, no matter what, because that's just the way it goes, right?
From prisons and everything else.
Or they hire another illegal that you've let in the country, right? You know, what's crazy to me is, if we're going to have a consistent line, then have a consistent line. Like the idea that you can just nuance your way, you know, if it works for us now, we go one way and we'll go the next, the other. It's dishonest, guys. If we say illegal immigration should be a problem, then that shouldn't be allowed. If you're here illegally, that's a crime, right? But it's whenever it's like the people they pardon, or either side. They do it with people they're on their political side. Like that sheriff he pardoned, who's a complete manipulator. Like, these people, guys, are not honest people, but they're on their side, so they pardon them, right? This is people that they're then demonizing, a category for what, 6 months now, and they just go, accept those because we now need that. Now, honestly, I haven't even seen that much happening in the farms and like the crop agriculture side of it until pretty recently. That's why I kind of think this was always the case.
So we're going to have an order on that pretty soon, I think. We can't.
Bottom line is that's the case. It's now coming out. And here is the report. Trump reverses course on ICE raids at restaurants and farms. says Immigration and Customs Enforcement officials were told on Thursday to halt raids on farms, not some farms, or the ones we trust, or the guys with the good records, or the ones that have letters like he tried to explain, because that's what all the partisans are going to scream. But no, halt raids on farms, restaurants, and hotels, right? Because they're all the same thing. This is embarrassing. And that's why a lot of Republicans are unhappy about this, because they were believing a politician, which that was their mistake. It says, our great farmers and people in the hotel and leisure business have been stating that our very aggressive policy in immigration is taking very good long-time workers away from them. Yeah, you mean like 75% of people that you already sent to El Salvador? You mean like people like Ozturk and Khalil who have no criminal record, who you manipulated and destroyed their lives? Yeah, this is just people, like how much you want to bet there are people in this very group, I can promise you, that are very clearly criminals. But it's not about looking at them like they would do with anybody else who said something about Israel. It's about giving a pass to people that are on their side, or rather that they need for certain interests. Because if you look at the information, guys, like we said before we ever got to this point, before the even election took place, which was that if you did what he claimed, it would destroy 1,000 different things in this country, because we are literally reliant on illegal immigration, sort of like Israel is, sort of like a lot of places are. That's not an accident, guys. This is our great farmers and people in the, it says, it's taking very good long-time workers away from them with those jobs being almost impossible to replace. Not really. I mean, what you're saying is it's the same point. It's just so frustrating that we have to pretend like maybe, but we got to be objective, right? Even when they're ridiculous. About 40% of U.S. farm workers are undocumented, according to the 2022 U.S. agriculture report. But if you're taking their lies, which are dishonest, aren't accurate, about 20-something million people from Biden, well, that surely would be a lot more, right? And how do we not know that Biden's secret plan was to infiltrate all the farms with all the illegal, evil, sinister terrorists, right? I guess Trump knows, though. He just gave a pass to him, so they must be okay. And it says, agriculture report says that about 75% of California farm workers are undocumented. But it's okay now. Unless he's going to say, except California, which probably wouldn't surprise me. So that's where we are. Dishonest. It started as the good ones that gave letters and they knew their guys and they worked there for 20 years, and it became everybody in these areas. That's dishonest. That is giving you a personal narrative that you repeat and then broad stroking the whole thing. Actually, I want to hold on to that. Here is Forbes reporting on the 13th. Trump Organization, after that, and continual is a point, but states this, and then the point is continues, and it really never stopped. Trump Organization keeps bringing in foreign workers to staff its clubs and winery, which is at least one reason why that took place. Because there's probably a huge business, issue for revenue by having to pay people more, or whatever it is. But on top of that, it's the same thing we saw with Elon Musk and the H-1B visas and the whole spin out they had when it turned out they were doing that. It's just dishonest, guys. These people are fronting. They're just not real. Now, there's a couple points I want to show you about U.S. citizens and veterans and different people that are getting arrested. U.S. citizen blasts ICE after being detained as he drove to work. They're the criminals, he says. Now, born in New York, regardless of whether he looks Hispanic or whether he speaks Spanish, he was born in New York City. This is what really, you see a lot of people that, you look at the comments, by the way, people talking about this guy online on Twitter. It's, who cares if he's a U.S. citizen? Look at him, that kind of thing. You'll get that. Now, honestly, I think a lot of those are bots. I think that's a lot of people trying to divide us in very dangerous ways. But the point is that there are people that are leaning into certain, go after them if they look a certain way. And that's what ICE is doing. That's undeniable at this point. And so this is an example of that. An American citizen who gets accosted. And I want to show you the way they treat this guy, which if you're honest and objective and you care about the Constitution, these people are showing you a dangerous escalation, like the Gestapo level stuff, guys, to where if they want, they can do what they want. They don't need to have a reason to ask for your identification. They don't have to have a reason to break into your car or bash your window open just because they think you look like somebody, or really what they're saying is you're brown and probably an immigrant based on our assumption. Over and over and over, this keeps happening. So it says a New Yorker who was stopped and detained, I'll show you a video in a second, by ICE, says he was treated like a criminal for simply existing as a Hispanic person in the United States. After the car was stopped, Lemus says he was surrounded by ICE and Homeland Security investigation vehicles. You realize because they claim he looked like someone they were looking for. But so you mean you saw randomly guy drives by and you go, oh, that looks like the guy we're looking for. What a coincidence. You see how flimsy that is? They clearly saw what they thought was an immigrant and they stopped the car. And that was enough to bring out Homeland Security and ICE. Talk about a waste of resources, guys. And it says the agents then threatened him and demanded his identification without having any real... You understand, that's not how the law works. I don't care what way you're framing this. If you believe in the Constitution, there is no order, executive or otherwise, that can then supersede that. So we are living in a place where you have rights, okay? Or rather, as we understand it, we outlined as human rights. Inalienable rights. And we argue that we have the ability to enforce them within these borders, but not that it only exists for Americans. Understand these things. The point is that within that is your right, well, the legal realities that have gone through legislation that are not repugnant to the Constitution, which if it's repugnant to the Constitution, it's null and void. That is Mayberry versus Madison. The point is that having your ID or being required to show it just when you're asked, that's the whole papers, please thing, guys. Guys, we're supposed to understand that's not what we are. And now that's what we are. And really, my point is that's always what this government has been, but we have been told otherwise. Now, it says Lima said he demanded the agent's name and badge number, but they refused. Also, that's a crime, by the way, to provide any identifying information, claiming they were not authorized to do so. So now if that's the case, probably a lie, that means they're telling you they've been ordered to not give their identification. Now, I don't care what your broken logic is. Well, the Democrats are going to go after him. Even if that's true, that doesn't change the law. This is what we keep seeing. The Constitution, the reality of the law just doesn't matter when you give an emotional narrative that makes sense to people that are emotional. Now it says, I am told that I'm not authorized to give my ID then, Lima said in response. Good for him. And the ICE agents then threatened him again. I'll play the video. It says, if we don't get your ID, we're going to need to figure out another way to ID you. Yeah, that's the world we're in right now. Not your rights, not about what we think you have to, we'll find another way. And that may not work out well for you, he says. Lemus was then placed in handcuffs for refusing to provide identification to ICE agents. Which is that's not how this works, guys. First of all, he's an American citizen, but the rights are the same for anybody, guys. That's the point. You're not required to do that. And by not showing it, you're not breaking the law. Now, there are some places in the country that argue that's the state law, and that's a contradiction to the Constitution, in my personal opinion. Either way, there's plenty of places in the country where that's not the case. And in general, they have to have a justifying reason. They can't just demand your identification. They are simply making it up by saying you look like somebody. That's how this works. That's how flimsy the system is right now. It says he said he was hesitant to cooperate because he hadn't committed any crimes, and he knew the federal agents were not local police. Oh, and you know what else becomes extremely relevant? The fact that there are people going around in fake ICE jackets and robbing people because they're pretending to be in ICE. You know why? Because they don't identify themselves. They refuse to give warrants. Well, guess what? Now anybody can do that. Because if you're setting the precedent that they're not required to do any of those things, then anybody showing up with an ICE vest, you may think, how do you know any better? And why would you then comply if you don't know and this is what's going on? See what I'm saying? And I argue this is being done on purpose. But so he, rightfully so, is going, I don't know who you are. I don't care what your vest looks like. You're not local police. You don't have any legal right to do what you're doing. And so he refused. So it says, I didn't want to get my ID. I didn't want to get my ID because as soon as I saw how they were dressed, I knew they weren't police officers. He says, I didn't commit a crime and I wasn't driving. That's an excellent point. So even further, he's in the passenger seat. Why does he have a legal responsibility to show you the ID? Because you demand it because he looks brown. That's what's happening. He says, this is not America. This is not how we as Americans should live or should have to live. The attorney said ICE can't just randomly on a hunch stop people, calling it contrary to the Constitution. And of course, to emotional people on the partisan side, they're going to call them dumb Democrats or whatever it is, even though that's the obvious constitutional reality. That, of course, you would argue for if it was somebody with a D next to the name who was doing it. Here's the clip. One of them anyway. There's a lot of this going around.
Up, guys. Let's see your ID, please.
23-year-old Elzon Lemus, an electrician, was in his work van with a coworker when they were pulled over by ICE agents in Westbury.
Because you look like somebody local.
Looking for?
Lemus asks why they need his ID.
All right, this is going to go one of two ways here. Okay. I need to see your ID. If you're not the guy I'm looking for, you're not the guy I'm looking for.
Jeez. That just sounds like a mafioso to me. This is the way they're acting. And both by the way he's speaking, but just by the way they're conducting themselves. That's not how the law works, guys. Period. There is no way around that. You don't just get to go demand it. And if you're not who I want to find, then you're okay. You're not guilty until proven innocent. And despite the fact that is seemingly how the reality is today, that's not the legal reality. And that's what he's doing.
Okay. Well, we need your ID.
Nah.
Okay,
I'm
if
not
you don't
getting
get your
hired.
ID, then we're gonna, have to figure out another way to ID you, and it may not work out well for you.
Okay, so I'm threatening you, right? We'll find a way to get it, and it might not be pleasant for you, right? That's still a crime. Now he starts to roll up his window, and that's when he doesn't break anything, but this is still a search and seizure violation. Okay, you don't just get to force your way into a car with no justification, which is what he does.
Listen, I'm rolling up. Keep it down. I keep it down.
These guys,
What are you doing?
these guys they believe they can do it. It's like nurses and doctors and people during COVID. They are so drunk on their own power, and they clearly have it. They can do whatever they want. The current government doesn't care.
The agent forces the door open and demands Lemus stops recording. Lemus was born.
Which, by the way, is also another violation. Where are all the constitutionalists out there? Don't you care about these things? I guess not when it's a brown guy, right? Now, to be clear, I'm only aiming that at people in the partisan team sports side. I said this often, but I want it to be clear. I believe most conservatives are pretty damn uncomfortable with what's happening right now. They see it. Doesn't mean they're gonna vote for left tomorrow. The point is that or be aware of the two-party illusion, but they see it. And you do out there too, guys. If you're not dumb, you see what's going on. This is ridiculous.
And raised in New York and was stunned.
Keep it down. I keep it down.
What are you doing?
The agent forces the door open and demands Lemus stops recording. Lemus was born and raised in New York and was stunned.
I felt like my rights were just like out the window, and like it's like that. It felt like I didn't have anything, anymore. Like I couldn't do much now.
Lemus was taken out of the car, handcuffed for about 25 minutes while the ICE agents searched him.
Right. Based on what? Nothing.
When they found his ID, they let him go.
Right.
They just left pretty upset because they couldn't take us. Me and my coworker, we were fine.
Okay. Now, what happened if he was in board shorts and didn't have his ID? What do you think would have happened? Are we really going to pretend like you don't know exactly what would have happened? Now, how about we go back a step? How about this happened whenever the date was when this first kicked off, right? Right before 270-something people got shipped out to El Salvador, who most have not come back, or almost all, I think. You know as well as I what would have happened. This man would have been put on one of those planes because they claimed there's people like that already went over there. There's U.S. citizens that have been deported. There's people that were on visas that were legally here with no criminal record that are currently in El Salvador. So there's one of your examples right there. Now, I said this in the beginning. This almost happened at least twice that I can prove, where an American citizen was this close to being sent to El Salvador, and it was because the Supreme Court put a stop to it that they ended up proving they were a U.S. citizen and didn't have to go. But it was this close. That's what's going on right now.
This happening at a time when ICE enforcement operations have been heightened across the country.
They can't randomly, on a hunch, stopping people. That's contrary to the Constitution.
Attorney Fred Brewing.
Regardless of your partisan side, guys, or that you're aware of it all, and the lies of all of it, that is simply the reality.
Says this case is an example of profiling.
Unless there is an articulable basis upon which there is a reason to ask someone for their identification, which this officer did not provide upon a request, there's a concern there.
We reached out to ICE for comment but have not heard back. For Lemus, even though he is a citizen, he still fears being pulled over again.
I felt like I lost all rights when they pulled me over and all that. I felt like I had nothing anymore.
At this point, no lawsuit has yet been filed, but Lemus and his attorney say they want to get the story out in the public to raise awareness. They also want to ask the DOJ for a full investigation.
Which I doubt will happen. And of course, if they did go full, just go after them and try to sue the government, or, however you want to look at it, I'm willing to bet you anything that they would go out of their way to destroy his life and his family's. Try to find people that might be in his family, that might be immigrants or illegal immigrants. Because realize even people here legally are being targeted, and they go, oh, well, you've got a violation from 6 years ago. You're out of here. That's been happening over and over. They're arresting people that show up to their meetings, which means they are technically here legally because they're in that process. That is the reality. Whether asylum, whether citizenship, people being told, you come here for your, American dream, and then they come here and they go through the process. They're waiting to get their final meeting, and Trump gets elected and runs people out of the country. And I don't think it's about Trump. I'm just that's the timing of it all. We saw the guy who was a Danish father who's currently still in prison, as far as I can tell, in Louisiana, who simply was at his meeting for his final citizenship. And they said, you have a paperwork miscommunication from 2015, and they arrested him. Father of 4, his wife's pregnant. I mean, and he's been going to meetings since then, and nobody had a problem about it. He's this close. He would that day he probably would have got his citizenship if it wouldn't have been for this agenda. Or the other MAGA person we just reported on who got arrested and almost went. It's just not unique to one thing or the other. They are going after everybody, guys, or rather whoever they want to, and it's not about you. Like people pretending like you're safe somehow. It's always how this works. You think it's only about the other side because they're the bad guys. And it either happens right away or the next party comes into power and it goes right back around. It's the same point, guys. This was authoritarianism, period. Now, this is simply just breaking this down. Here are the facts. And I agree with this. That's why I grabbed it. This is the reality. You can check it with everything else. He simply says on June 12th around 7:30, Elzin Lemus, 23-year-old American citizen, was detained by ICE while in a passenger in a car. Agents stopped the vehicle, claimed he looked like someone they were seeking, surrounded him with vehicles. They demanded his ID, threatened consequences. He captured it on the cell phone video, demanded the agents' names and badge numbers. They refused. That alone should be enough to hold these people accountable, but the government right now does not care. Leading him to withhold his ID, he was handcuffed for 25 minutes. The agents confiscated his phone to stop filming, also a crime. His ID was eventually found in his pocket, and he was released without charges. That's where we are. And don't forget, again, you have people who are pretending to be ICE. He ran in yelling, immigration. Now, I've seen two examples of this so far. Running in, one guy, there was one about an ICE vest. This guy's coming in yelling immigration and tied people up and robbed them. Just very obvious. Now, let's talk about, that being discussed, a conversation of immigration and how that's overlapping. Realize all of the stuff we're going to discuss seems to be related to that in some way. So, the story that's breaking today. Officials tell the Associated Press they are searching for a 57-year-old man in shooting two Minnesota lawmakers. Now, one was with her husband, and the other one was shot, I think, alone. Now, it's just today reporting a man posing as a police officer shot and killed a Minnesota lawmaker and her husband in a brazen attack at their home early Saturday. And a second lawmaker and his wife were wounded in a separate shooting in what Governor Tim Walz described as targeted political violence. So apparently, that's funny that I didn't see that earlier. The point is apparently only one of them died, but the other one were wounded, which is, I think, why it's not being reported as much. Police were searching for the gunman responsible for the attacks on the Democratic legislators. Writings found inside a fake police car recovered at one of the shooting scenes mentioned the names of multiple lawmakers and other officials. They're calling them manifesto. We'll talk about the no king protest. Well, they're not really flyers. They're like a bunch of printer paper with no kings written on it. It all feels very contrived. And we'll go into more of it when we get through the basic facts. So realize basically this guy showed up, pretending to be a cop and then killed people. And they ended up coming, and the way that this came about, and I'll play the clip in a second, seems very suspicious to me. They claim they just happened to go check one of the lawmakers just to be safe. I mean, that makes sense, but it just feels a little bit off. And then when they got there, they saw him coming out as a cop and he opened fire on them, as they thought was a cop. And then he ran out the back. So everyone's trying to fit this into what they think is going on. I think it's important to just look at the facts and consider those possibilities in a situation that we do not yet know. The person that we'll point to, his name is Vance Bolter, I believe, a Democrat is what we're told, is a suspect right now, unless that's changed in the last 30 minutes. That's important. There's been many examples in the past where people are a suspect that turn out not to be the culprit, or that the court of public opinion just decides on Twitter who the person is, and that overtakes the conversation. And it turns out that's not the truth. It's happened more than once. Now, and I should add too, people that do that on purpose for an agenda, for a political side, or just because they're crazy and like to watch the world burn. And by the way, tell me if you guys can hear this necklace still making noise. I hope not. I didn't want to take it off because it's important to me, but I put it under my shirt. For those listening, let me know in the chat if you can still hear that. Two people familiar with the matter identified the suspect as being sought as 57-year-old Vance Bolter. And the people could not publicly discuss details of the ongoing investigation, spoke to AP on condition of anonymity. Melissa Hortman, a former Minnesota House Speaker, and her spouse were shot, so it's a former House Speaker, and killed early Saturday in the Brooklyn Park home. A second state lawmaker, Senator John Hoffman, and his wife were shot multiple times in Champlin. Officers say both Hortman and Hoffman were mentioned in the suspect's writings. It says, quote, when we did a search of the vehicle, there was a manifesto, which is just so, maybe they're just using that word whenever they find anything as writing, but it just seems really forced that it's all suddenly anyone just commits crimes as a manifesto. That seems ridiculous to me. Or it's that way for a reason, because that fits into how easy it is, whether we're talking about Manchurian Candidate or any number of things that should not be dismissed. CIA, psychological manipulations, neuro weapons, like these things are not a joke. Even just mentioning things like that get certain people to run away laughing, but it's been done for years. It's obvious. But the point is that could be a sign of just, that being a certain way. Cause then you go, look, here's the narrative they laid out, which meets perfectly how we want you to see this. It's typical. It says, we took action on alerting them to providing security where necessary. Now, State Patrol Colonel Christina Bogajevic asked to people, quote, out of an abundance of caution, not to attend, this is what I found interesting, any of the No Kings protests that were scheduled across Minnesota. How do you say that again? Bojovic said authorities didn't have any direct evidence the protests would be targeted, but said the suspect had some No Kings flyers, which I'll show you. They didn't look like flyers to me. Organizers announced that all the protests across the state were canceled. So, from the point that this is somehow an effort led to, well, I'll wait to get at all that. I think it's important to look at it both ways, but that to me stands out. If this was about somehow, want the Democrat side, then why would it lead to stopping those? Maybe that's how it sells it to you, but it doesn't make sense to me. Really, it doesn't make sense either way. To me, this sounds like a government operation to manipulate people into the positions they need us in for what's happening. But it says at the time of her death, Hartman was the top Democrat leader in the state legislature. She was also a former House Speaker. She was first elected in 2004. She and her husband had 2 children. Suspect exploited the trust of our uniforms. I just think that's interesting about the idea of the ICE uniform. It's the same kind of overlapping point. You have another person dressing like authority at a time when authority is not identifying themselves. Now, you have to connect that no matter what. Whether that's why, at a time when people are being clearly shown, all you have to do is just pretend. You don't have to declare anything. You have to show anything. That's where we are right now. And people take advantage. Or operations and intelligence take advantage. Now, it says the suspect was dressed like a uniformed officer, but with a different Praetorian Guard thing, and operating a vehicle that, quote, looked exactly like an SUV squad car. It was equipped with lights, emergency lights, and looked exactly like a police vehicle. Very interesting. So here's the clip, which I found this explains a little bit of the timing about what happened.
Just going to proactively check on Speaker Mayor's Court, and then police there encountered the gunman or someone with a gun and exchanged gunfire. Can you just go over that one time, please?
I can. Good morning, Police Chief Mark Bruley, Brooklyn Park Police Department. The question is, how did we get to Representative Hortman's house, and it was proactively or not. The circumstances that unfolded in Brooklyn Park this morning is that we assisted the Champlin Police Department on a shooting. That shooting was made aware by one of our sergeants that it was at Senator Hoffman's home. In hearing that very intuitive sergeant asked our officers to go check on Melissa Hortman's home, representative that lives in our community, just proactive.
I mean, again, it makes sense if that's the only 2 that live there, that what I think I'm getting is the case, but I don't know, it just feels, just kind of randomly go check on them. I mean, again, it makes sense, but it's something about that just stood out to me as, consider that going forward and keep an eye on that point.
As due diligence to swing by. That police officer and his partner pulled down the street when they arrived at Melissa's house. They noticed that there was a police vehicle in the driveway with the lights, emergency lights on, and what appeared to be a police officer at the door coming out of the house. When our officers confronted him, the individual immediately fired upon the officers, who exchanged gunfire, and the suspect retreated back into the home.
Was this an actual police officer or an impersonating police officer?
Yes, the question is, was it a real person or a person impersonating a police officer? It was not a real police officer. This is somebody that clearly had been impersonating a police officer, again, using the trust of this badge and this uniform to manipulate their way into the home.
And we should be asking if this is the first time. Maybe this has been going on longer than this, and in other contexts, if it's some kind of an operation, not necessarily killing people, but just using it for other purposes.
Manipulate their way into the home.
So, Chief Early, Janice Roto, Pair 11, the person not only was wearing a badge posing as a police officer, when they approached their victims, they had a car with lights and sirens?
Yes, the question is, what kind of vehicle and how were they dressed? They did drive a vehicle that looked exactly like an SUV squad car. It was equipped with lights, emergency lights that looked exactly like a police vehicle. And yes, they were wearing a vest with taser, other equipment that would, a badge very similar to mine, that no question, if they were in this room, you would assume that they are a police officer.
Which you never should do. That's the point. Don't, like it's the same, like getting pulled over. Legally, technically, you don't have to pull over until you feel safe, despite how every cop in the world would treat you like a criminal if you do that. Or any of these things. A little point of advice, if you are ever pulled over, if you're ever arrested, don't say anything. I don't care what they tell you. I don't care how much they threaten you. I don't care how much they claim that makes you look like a criminal. Never. And there are so many lawyers out there that will tell you that. The bottom line is there's examples in the past where people who are innocent simply open their mouth to help, and that gets used against them and they get charged with a crime. It's not unique, guys. These people they're actually trained to do it that way. And the bottom line is that you need to basically your rights are important. Don't say a word. Get a lawyer. Go with that. I think that's important. That's my personal advice. But in this case, the point is people are trusting, right? He looks like a cop. They treat them like a cop. And that's exactly the problem. Here. Oh, and Aaron simply says, law enforcement officials say they made a proactive check at Hortman's home after a lawmaker who lived nearby was shot and found a police vehicle in the driveway, emergency lights. He was actually the gunman. Not apparently, now we're finding out not an actual cop, right? But so you're already seeing this kind of spin out, right? With no facts that you can actually prove, right? Just because people are of a certain a D or an R next to their name, or that we say that, does not then therefore mean it's connected to what you want it to be. But you're already seeing this before we actually have the facts. People like this saying, now I should be clear, this one's simply asking, which is fair, but there's a lot of it out there that are simply going, this is that. Look at the protest bill I'll show you DC Drano doing exactly that. But it says, no King's protest led to Minnesota shooting. I mean, look at what you're looking at here. These aren't flyers. These are somebody literally wrote with a Sharpie, no Kings, and then printed a bunch of them. Are we going to pretend that's like, how does it make sense? That seems really flimsy to me. But overall, think about the whole point of this, right? You've got a person who they claim is a Democrat shooting 2 Democrat lawmakers. So how do you fit that in to make sense? Right? You can consider, okay, it's an effort to frame the Republicans as being crazy, right? So it's a Republican thing attacking Democrats. Certainly could be. That's one of the possibilities. Or the other side of it would be Republicans in some way trying to frame the Democrats. Now, if we're going to look at only those 2 things, there's far more evidence leaning towards the latter. Because if he had flyers, why would he bring flyers about the thing when he's trying to frame Republicans? Then maybe he didn't plan to use them. Maybe he didn't plan to get caught. But, why would he shoot that? It's just there's so many. Why would a Democrat do that against Democrats? Doesn't mean it proves it. Both of those things are very clearly possibilities. But I am of the mind, as I think, the partisan game is not really what it's about, that this seems to be something led to create this kind of chaos for the very idea, like basically what we're all doing, whatever side, is leading to people doing this. So we need more surveillance, more crackdown on your rights, more, all of it. You can't protest. You'll be met with violence, as Trump just said. I think that's what it's all really about. But again, I guess another alternative is this guy's just an actual lunatic. That he is a Democrat, that he was going to go protest, and he just decided to shoot these people because they didn't vote for what he liked or something like that. Like, it could just be completely unconnected. But I don't think that. These are all things we should be considering. Yeah, see, starting just as I feared. People are just so lazy with their arguments. We can't but because it makes the argument for why Democrats are the villains and Trump is the good guy. That's as simple as this comes down to. This is just the tweet that he was sharing. The alleged suspect named Vance Luther Bolter. Now, I was talking to Orwell earlier. I swear I know what this guy, I've seen this face before. I could not remember what it's from. If you know what it is, we're both interested. We were talking about it earlier. Put it in the chat for us, and I'll try to keep an eye on it. I swear this exact photograph we have covered before. I just couldn't remember who it was. Now, this is apparently Vance Bolter. Was appointed by the Governor's Workforce Development Board in 2019 by Tim Walz, which of course is one of the obvious things that they go, oh my God, that's the thing. That's how you connect it. Or it could just be the same answers we already gave, and it just happened to work for Tim Walz. I still don't think it makes much sense when you look at the bigger picture. One side or the other seems to omit certain things to kind of make it fit in. But that definitely matters, right? But it says he was also appointed to the Governor's Workforce Development Council in 2016 by then Governor Mark Dayton. Now here is DC Drano, and I'll play this clip. Of course, you see he's juxtaposing their responses next to the No Kings flyers, just really trying to make a point. And he says, the No Kings protest is officially a domestic terrorist movement. These guys are such clowns, guys. They have an agenda. That's all that's happening here. Now, look, is that possible? Of course it is. Are we going to pretend like this proves that that's the thing? If you're honest and not a child, you know that's ridiculous. Evidence is required to make a claim that this protest is why this happened or that they're responsible. Because you realize you can have a protest that then people support who then go out and do things of their own volition that isn't connected to some organized effort. Obviously, it could be. But you see, I care about facts. I care about proving the things that connect and making sure we can hold that it's not some flimsy psyop narrative meant to make us attack each other. He says the Minnesota assassin was a radical Democrat, which, again, the ideas that you can force on this, as far as I could tell, this guy seems like an operative. But it says who had No Kings flyers, which are we really going to say those are No Kings flyers? In his vehicle and targeted Democrat politicians who voted against free healthcare and illegal aliens. Oh, I see. So they voted the way you don't like. So you went and shot them in hopes that that would promote the thing you want while having flyers that point to the thing you're supporting, right? It's sort of like pretending that the Democrats violently rioting on Los Angeles, as they framed it, was somehow in the interest of supporting illegal immigration, right? You're creating the thing that they then use to say we don't want immigrants, and that's in the Democrats' support. These things don't make any sense anymore because it's all just becoming chaotic. And I think that clearly should show you, at least make you ask whether it's really not about partisanship. Time to shut it all down, he says. Right, because now we're going to shut down protests because DC Drano said. But he cares about the Constitution, guys. He's all America first, but if you come out and do what we don't like, we're going to shut you down. These are cartoons. Mary, what happened to the Epstein file, bud? How'd that work out? Well, here's the clip he shared. Oh, and honestly, I think the reason he even did this first part is just to show her eyes, because they look. If you just focus in, her eyes look like they're weird, and she's like all work. But her answer's calm and normal. But it's just that they love the subjective points.
Events were also targeted by the person in the manifesto in the car.
We don't have any direct links. However, there were some flyers that said No Kings.
Asked whether there's a connection to the protest.
Within the suspect vehicle. And as we know, the planned events throughout the state of Minnesota today is a No Kings event.
And so the reference materials that were inside of the vehicle that we saw, we have no understanding that any of the No Kings events would be targeted, but we also find it of interest to the public that these would be in there, and we want to alert everybody until we do that. Because this is such an active investigation with information not knowing right now, we feel it's an obligation to all of you and the public across the state of Minnesota to alert you of it, and that's why the Colonel made the notation of recommending people don't go today. But the individuals are not in custody yet.
Right, so they say, shut it down, don't go to it. The Democrats. Right, but so you're arguing this is about, it just doesn't line up, guys. The objectives don't make sense, but see, facts don't matter to people like DC Drano. It's about the agenda. It's about framing it as whatever you want it to be. That's ridiculous with what they're trying to frame it as. And as somebody jokingly put in the chat, they radicalized Democrat. Like, the point is, guys, if you're stuck on left or right, you're already radicalized. That's my point. You're a partisan. You've lost the plot. It's very clear to me. And I don't mean that in just you align with certain ideas or you vote here and there. I'm talking about the radical team sport politics, like DC Drano, like people on both sides of the paradigm that are just adherent to the team, no matter what. We all know it, guys. It's very transparent today.
So we want to make sure, as that very active manhunt is underway and continues, that we make sure that we're sharing that, and that's part of why we're making the recommendation. As to the investigation and the list, we are working through that now and talking to individuals.
Oh, that's right. And there's a list in there of other, we mentioned it quickly in the article, but of other lawmakers, of other targets.
And we'll continue to.
By the way, Democrats.
What I would say with the list is there's a large number of people. That's all I can say about it. We will work through all of that, what the motivations of this are, and we'll provide that as you can. This is really a public safety announcement for everybody so that we can make sure people are informed and make safe decisions throughout the day.
Okay. So back to the point. So you have half the conversation saying this is an effort to frame the Republicans, at least from the right side. But at the same exact time, you've got DC Drano arguing this is because of dangerous Democrats. So as usual, they'll throw both of the wall. and hope they both will stick for them, or whichever one you choose. Your choice. Pick whichever one you like, because both are being argued by people with lots of reach. That's my point, guys. There's no facts. They're just going with their emotional, what works for you. I mean, obviously, neither one really meets all the facts. That's my point, is it's kind of whatever we want to point to. People like this are ridiculous, in my opinion. Now, Elon Musk comes out and says the far left is murderously violent. And this is one of these MAGA Zionist overlaps that says the left kills the CEO of United Healthcare, kills 2 Israeli ambassador staffers, attempts to twice to assassinate Trump, doxes and attempts to murder ICE agents. Are we kidding me? Are you kidding me? And now kills a Minnesota representative, a Democrat. Like, the idea that you could frame just the Democrats as responsible, this is so simplistic minded, guys. That's childish. That you would reprimand somebody in first grade for writing like that in some kind of a report because it's ridiculous. It's called your broad stroking, broad brush, however you want to put it. It says the left has become a full-blown domestic terrorist organization. Oh, so there is a narrative. That's what you're all putting forward now. I get it. But that's not new. My point is, every time they get the argument, they try to jam it in there because these people are destroying this country, whether they care about that or not, whether they know it or not. You are creating the very division against us, against your own neighbor, and claiming that's for the American interest. Now, on top of that, are you talking about just random people who align with the Democrat ideology or the Democrat politicians? Because are you actually pretending that every single person that believes in Democrat anything is now suddenly a terrorist? Well, guess who that works for, you complete moron? The government. But kills 2 Israeli ambassadors. Well, there's a lot over that story. That wasn't Democrats, guys. That's insanely stupid to make that case. It attempts twice to assassinate Trump. Are we kidding me? I said that again. Are you kidding me? The point is, twice? Well, your narrative is that it was 3 times, but I guess that third one that was embarrassing and really fell apart, you just ignore now? Is that how it works? Well, the second one was also a guy that was like 3 football fields away on another parking lot, like across from the golf course. They say had a gun that nobody even really went into. Even the first one has now been rolled back by Cash and Bongino to apparently be one person, despite the facts directly contradicting that. And that seems like a complete ploy every which way through. On top of that, doxes ICE agents. Guys, these are government employees. There is no such thing if you're asking for their names, which is all that it was. Nobody said, here's where they live. The point is, they're simply saying we have a right to know who you are because that's the law. And they say they're doxing them. The very people who made a big thing about like the whole doxing conversation. Like, these people are either that ignorant or by saying it's doxing when it's not, it's like any of the rest of the conversations. You're making it meaningless. And now kills a representative. It's scary. And Musk says the far left is murderously violent because he's, like I said, the Pied Piper of all of this for a long time now. And rightly so, Decentralized News points out, yeah, if there's one thing Elon Musk hates, it's clearly murderous violence, right? Right, guys? He clearly has a problem with murderous violence, as you can clearly tell, right? For the podcast, he's glowing next to all the Netanyahus in every picture. But over here, all of them are dangerous. Like, he's literally saying half this country are murderous terrorists. How is that not, like, laugh-worthy? Okay. Who is Vance Luther Bolter? Now, this is the important part, I think. Suspect in Minnesota lawmaker killings identified. Suspect. Still suspect unless you guys show me in the chat something's evolved. Up until I started, he was still the suspect, and they hadn't caught him yet. Bolter is reportedly the CEO of what's called Red Lion Group, based in none other than the Democratic Republic of Congo, which in and of itself, for many reasons, I find interesting. The Praetorian Guard Security Services. According to Minnesota Africans United website, it says, quote, I have been doing projects in the Democratic Republic of Congo in Central Africa for the last 3 years with the Red Lion Group, Bolter wrote on his LinkedIn page, which I'll show you in a second, noting that he is currently open to work. Interesting timing. Okay. That just those, the rest of it's stuff we've already reported. You can read the article for yourself. It's all included. So one person pointed this out. Now, what's funny is actually I was going through this, doing my own just research based on the report and looking up the different groups and, the different things, trying to find where they might connect to. And then it was fun. I ended up looking on Twitter and was like, this is like, it's not a lot of prominent. Like, there's not a lot of people that are covering this that have a million followers, right? Which is obviously for a very clear reason because most of them are manipulators. The point is that this is a lot of conversation, though. across Twitter, there's a lot of people like this who I was like, oh, I guess I'm not going to be the one breaking the story. It was everywhere, which is good though. I love to see that there's so many people that are doing their due diligence, like immediately. What is the Red Lion Group? All right. What is Praetorian Guard Services? What does that connect to? What does that mean? And obviously, this should be like the most important part of who this guy is, not because he's got a D next to his name, but whether or not that's the whole ploy, that all of it, the left-right paradigm, from my perspective anyway. But really, what does he connect to? And what does that show you? And so I'll include this. It just says Vance Bolter, the suspect in today's shooting, was the CEO of an international NGO. That's important. I'm sure I'm going to go through this in depth more as we go forward to find out if there's any other connections through like USAID, which I just shared again today. They're claiming there's some massive, they're reporting there's a massive story showing what we all know, by the way, money laundering and all this through USAID. And my point was simply that, yes, many of us in the honest independent media have been covering that, the regime change engine and the money laundering for years now. But of course, the new report by all the partisans leaves out the main thing, which is that it is both sides of the paradigm. I just said, look at Trump's last administration to literally prove that. 9 times out of 10, what they're pointing to today in outrage was happening also during Trump's administration. They don't care about facts, though. My point, though, is an NGO, there's going to be some overlap there. But it says, but I couldn't find any photographs or digital records of this work, only a generic website, which appears to have been shut down very recently. The Red Lion Group appears to have run out of funding about a month or two ago. That's what the claims are anyway. And of course, here's Nick Sorter doing what they always do. Breaking! The suspect who killed Horton this morning identified as this person. He is the suspect, yes, but the way you're framing that makes it sound as if this is the guilty party. That's what partisans do. But he says, Bolter was Tim Walt's appointee. What a shock. He's connected. Oh, so you're already building on something. When you have a suspect, what you just did right there is dishonest journalism, right? But that's how these guys roll. It's all about building the narrative into what they want people to think. Even if he ends up being the case, the honest way to cover this is to make sure, like in the past, it's somebody like that they run through the mud and turns out not to be the guy. That their lives change forever, guys. You know this, especially when they're not guilty and people go on calling them that anyway. But it says, this person says, I want to know what he's been doing there. Maybe in 3-letter federal agency knows. And this person says a bunch of USAID awards in Congo got canceled around the time he started job seeking. So we're going to go through this in depth, guys. This is something I added later in the prep. So I didn't want to take another hour or plus to get it going, but probably tomorrow, if I have time, we're going to get into this. So don't forget that. Now here's just the image that I've able to find that I wasn't able to find the actual website link. I'm going to try to find that more tomorrow. But this is a Red Lion Group is one of them. There's a Red Lion Control that is not the same thing. There's like a few other Red Lion things that people are already conflating online that are not, as far as I can tell, the same thing. But here's what it says. Red Lion Group's mission is to deliver superior results in every company we create, control risks, conduct ourselves with the highest integrity, and create jobs for local people. So some weird company that comes in and makes companies and jobs, and that is like the perfect prop up for some kind of intelligence apparatus. That's my opinion. Now, this is just what Grok had to say. And I said, give me a link to the website. And it says the website for Red Lion connected to Vance Luther Bolter is no longer active, as multiple sources indicate it has been taken down or defunct. I just think it's important to understand that this suddenly went away very recently. Now, Jim Stewartson points out the only Red Lion Group operating in Congo is basically a company run by Eric Prince, named Horatu Porta. Or Patra, excuse me. Now, the reason I didn't want to go in this in depth is because I wasn't able to do deep background on the Red Lion Group. The website's not there anymore. So it's difficult to connect that this is the same group, seeing as how there's a lot of overlapping, groups that aren't that being conflated. Nonetheless, I wanted to include this in case this turns out to be more relevant than anything else, because Eric Prince is obviously a problem in this conversation. But we're going to go over all the LinkedIn pages and everything else in the next part. But as he says, so Vance Luther Bolter was the CEO of a private military company in the Democratic Republic of Congo. You do not say, he says. And it shows here that Eric Prince returns to the Democratic Republic of Congo amid U.S. mineral security push. I'm telling you, there's more going on here, guys. And then he points out that Bolter has been reported to be the suspect. And he goes, he's not, and this is his opinion. He says he's not far left. He says, don't let them seize this narrative. Not today. He goes on to say, and he's just showing you other points that I don't think you can prove one way or the other. I mean, but if he makes a good point, if you look at some of the different things, it doesn't necessarily align with what they call far left. So that's more evidence of if you were going to make it one versus the other, about one side framing the other, which again, I don't really think is the full picture. If you had to choose, there's more evidence on the side of this being something that is being, like an effort to make it seem as if this is like framing one side, right? And the idea that it's somehow to frame the right, there's just not enough evidence to make that make sense to me, but maybe there's things we aren't seeing. God, it looks so familiar. Advanced Defending Freedom. Now he goes on to say, to all the MAGAs who think this guy was a good friend of Tim Walz, he says the list includes U.S. Representative Ilhan Omar and Senator Tina Smith. You see, this doesn't make much sense with the narrative they're putting forward. Governor Tim Walz was also on the list. So if you're claiming that he was, also you could argue that he's disgruntled about it, but you see how the narrative evolves, and it's not as simple as saying he works for the Democrats, because it all there's more to it. And it says, in addition to Attorney General Keith Ellison, dozens of other Democrats from Minnesota were also included. And you know as well as I, if you were going to fit that into one of those two boxes, it seems like that would be either somebody who was going after Democrats or somebody who wanted to make it seem that somebody was going after Democrats. And he says, Donald Trump kept mentioning that terrorists from the Congo were coming to America to kill people. That is interesting. Eric Prince, do you know Vance? It's asking if he knows him. Just different points I think are interesting. Now here is the article that Whitney wrote for TLAV called The Prince and the Spy that overlaps the important point that Eric Prince is essentially he's very dangerous and very concerning in many ways of his own right. But in this case, the point is that this Israeli spy, Letitia, I think was her name on the right, or rather the argument of the company that Eric Prince has used as sort of the foot in the door. Because if you don't have an American within it, or rather at the front, then you can't claim it's an American company. So you have Israeli intelligence creating side companies and having him there to pretend like it's an American company. That's Comframe. Look it up. It's right in the article, as well as the fact that it's very openly discussed that the Israeli government uses front companies, Israeli intelligence, through Unit 8200. It's all written in here. And so the point is, with Prince overlap, you start to wonder whether Red Lion Group was one of those fronts. I think it's very much worth your consideration. Another interesting side note, by the way. Oh, really? I knew I should have saved that. Gosh darn it. Oh, it is right there. Okay. The article updated that changed the writing, but it says right there still. Moments ago, Israel launched what's called Operation Rising Lion. I just thought that was interesting. Not that it's necessarily connected, but let me show some other things I think are relevant. Here is the Praetorian Guards website, which is one of the groups he worked with. And here he is right here. Vance. Here's what it says. Dr. Vance Bolter has been involved in security situations in Eastern Europe, Africa, North America, Middle East, including the West Bank, Southern Lebanon, Gaza Strip, all the places that Israel's completely manipulating. Now, you have to understand, that alone shows you this guy's more than he seems. He's not some random Democrat working for Waltz if he's literally conducting security operations in the most dangerous places in the world. Guys, this guy's an operative. That's my opinion, but my God. And it says training by both private security firms and people in the U.S. military. And it works for the Praetorian Guard. Like the name even nods to like Imperial, the Emperor's Inner Guard. It's a very weird overlap. Now here is his LinkedIn page. CEO of the Red Lion Group, which by the way, is the website's down and it's apparently not there anymore, but that's still what it says. And you can look down here, Red Lion Group, full-time, and different points that might stand out in the future. You keep this. I think that's important. Now, Congo, which is where that's supposed to be operating before we get more into the Praetorian Guard part, is interesting to me, seeing as how the U.S. and Israel are actively manipulating Congo more than most places in the world, like very clearly. Haiti, Congo, there's a lot of different discussions. I talked with Dan Cohen about this and Kim Ives. Very clear what's going on there. Oh, actually, I think that was about Haiti. But either way, that's both. This article is about both, as well as this one here. U.S. Israel implicated in Congo coup. So these are just overlapping points that I think are relevant because I sense a connection there. And if he's involved in intelligence, then I almost guarantee he's connected to both these places. Here is the image we used for today. This was pretty much breaking when we went live. Gunman who shot 2 Minnesota lawmakers wore a latex mask, seen on security camera with a fake police car flashing emergency lights in the background. So the question becomes, how do they know this was the Bolter guy? I mean, this is still developing, as always, which is frustrating. You have the police holding things to their chest. Maybe it's because they're trying to investigate, which I'm very pessimistic to their logic, but that is the case sometimes because they put it out, then it helps the people trying to get away, if that's how you think this is working. But interesting, right? So that's apparently that's the shot from one of these cameras. So how do they know it's him? Here's CNN, same thing, saying authorities investigating whether the suspect wore a mask. That's him right there. So here is a breakdown I thought was good from Adam saying, so the alleged suspect not only had a manifesto which lists dozens of Democrats and only Democrats as his targets, but is a hardcore evangelist and supporter of the American Defending Freedom, which is an ultra-Christian nationalist legal organization. Okay. Doesn't really sound like a Democrat to me, but we should not assume. Maybe all of that is set up for that very reason. But it says that funds anti-abortion regulation, advocates for religious not in public schools, thinks the Constitution should be interpreted through God's laws, and opposes gay marriage. I mean, come on. One of two things. That's all a construct to make it look that way, or this guy's not remotely on, the side you frame him as. All of which should be considered. Now, for the DC Dranos out there, do they even look to information like this, which is the case? Do they not care? Are they omitting it? Because, those are questions you should ask, because this is not being reported by the mainstream alternative media, not really. And it says he runs an armed security company, which is why he would have access to a vehicle identical to a police car with emergency lights. Praetorian. It says, and the gear, uniform like an officer, taser handgun. He served on the board of some local work investment charities, and was one of many private representatives on a governor's work board, and represented many international organizations who did outreach work, usually religious or business development. Apparently, he's listed as some kind of super preacher in some conversations. In Africa until 2019, and then seems to have been abruptly removed from multiple positions. Sounds like an operation, guys. It really does. All the hallmarks to me. Clearly a right-wing nut targeting Dems and protesters. That's how he sees it. Now, the evidence does seem that way, but we always have to consider that that's being presented so you take that bait. But I'm in agreement right now. The evidence, especially since the way that the right is covering this, that they're taking a lot of face value, seems to suggest this is a partisan manipulation tactic, but being framed as, they're basically a right situation trying to go after Democrats, but kind of frame it as the left. I think that's what the evidence points to. But the reality to me is this is more about getting us to fight each other. Americans against Americans as somebody else takes over this country. Now it says another shot of the company gear that they have, Praetorian. They said in his car that they find a bag of ammunition with a Father's Day card on it. Now this isn't the same shot as I understand it. That's just an image of the gear. And it says the latest report also suggests targeting abortion providers was also on the list. Doesn't sound like a Democrat to me. But he had no King's flyer, as they say, which they weren't, though. They were writing on the paper. It's interesting. It says, yes, he also had a car and outfit that resembled police and impersonated a police officer. Just like that, he planned to impersonate a protester and give out flyers at the protest, which police say was the target of his manifesto. So that does make sense. If the manifesto is saying that's where this was going to go, then the flyers were designed for that, unless, again, it's all a big construct. But the more you go into it, it becomes less and less likely to me. It says, but he was a Waltz appointee. And it says, no, those low-level business councils are nonpartisan. Dozens and dozens of business people serve on them, and they try to make them politically diverse. It's true. He says, you often don't meet the governor until some meet and greet meeting. And the point is that I agree, whether that's the case or not, which I do agree. The point is that being on that does not therefore make you like part of Waltz's team, or however you want to frame that. It could, but that's my point about the assumptive partisan game and all this. But it goes, because he was a Christian, he could not be a Democrat. Says not what I said. Plenty of Christians are Democrats. Hardcore anti-abortion, being objective, I think. It's worth reading. It's all the points you're making. He talks about the religious aspect of it here. And it says he ran an NGO funded by Democrats. And it goes, doesn't seem to be any of the evidence of that. Best we can tell, he tried to expand a security business to Congo as a logistics business, development, security. Now, one thing it seems this reporting is not really allowing, considering is that this might be like an intelligence operation that's beyond partisanship. But it says the next BS claim is that he did a bit of real estate transactions showing a sketchy paper trail of big money transactions. First, clearly, they did not know the difference between commas and decimals. Point being, it seems like this might have been faked and rushed, which seems more like a not intelligence, kind of like partisan manipulation. I mean, it's up in the air. That's what I think is the important point to take from this. And now, this is all more you can read. It goes on. Interestingly, in Texas now, the Texas Capitol has been evacuated following a credible threat towards state lawmakers. Okay, now this begins to eat if it could be somebody just copycatting, but to me, with all that we're seeing, this feels like an operation across. This feels like a big move to create this. And they've been evacuated following a credible threat towards lawmakers, according to the Department of Public Safety. Now, it also weirdly overlaps with what we're going to get to in a second, which at the U.S. Capitol with a Democrat protest rushing up the barrier and then sitting down. But you'll have the people you might expect, like Nick Sorter, going, lock them all up, throw them in jail, insurrection, because you're a complete clown hypocrite that will do the same thing you criticize for 5 years. My God, guys. Now, even if you want to pretend he's being like, those are the rules, that's what you did to us, it's still childish. You're doing what you guys said was, beyond the pale. You're violating our rights. You're doing, but then do it back to them because they did it first. We're being led by kindergartners, guys. It's insane. Now, here's the post for No Kings, and they've added the top. They recommend that we cancel all the events in Minnesota, which I kind of think it adds to it. If the idea was about trying to keep this going and support and frame the other side, then why would it lead to shutting down the thing that you want to support? Like just, there's more to it. You give me your opinions. I'm open to it. And then I thought this was interesting. This is just a clip. Did I include that? No, I didn't. It's just right here. So it's just a clip. This person is sharing a video, and this is in Murfreesboro. It's close to me. And my point in showing you all this is, this is just one of these locations. And whether or not, which I very much do think there's a manipulation through all this, whether left or right, meant to justify what the government wants to do, which, by the way, is I'm agreeing with Republicans in that regard. They just seem to think it's only Democrats. I think the reality is it's your government against all of you. The point is that you see a lot of these things where there's people that are just out there waving American flags, saying the Constitution matters. And these are being called radical Democrats. There's not violence. They're peacefully protesting. They're just holding signs. Now, if somebody came along and started waving a Nazi flag, would you call them all Nazis? No, because that'd be dumb, right? The same way it happened in the trucker convoy. Or if somebody comes along and starts beating people up or breaking car windows, are they all suddenly criminals? You guys know all of this. The point is, these statements, you already know. It's the manipulators are pointing to that don't care either way that will come back and say, see, lock them all up because they're all rapists and terrorists and Democrats, Hamas supporters, jihadists. It's lunacy. But just like the left and right, there are good people in any position and left and right and up and down and out there who just truly believe, not even necessarily going to this, the Christ is King point, just because that's what he's clearly pointing on here, which, by the way, is a Republican thing, which is interesting. The point is, though, that there's people all over the place that just, whether they align one way or the other, who just believe in, the foundational ideas of this country. And they're being called monsters by the people who are the monsters. I mean that about left and right, just like the trucker convoy. You were called monsters by the actual monsters. That's how this tends to work. Now, let's not forget, this is one of the many shows we did on this. January 6th was always a very clear government operation. The evidence is shocking. As you all know, both left and right, by the way, people just care to look. As the picture up here is the picture of the guy who got caught. That's actually the clip from the video. He's wearing a Trump hat. You can see closely. And he's on video going, we did it. We tricked him. We got him. Like literally on video about the Capitol. It's just, there's so much. Or the fact that this is, what's his name? Sergei Beninin, I think. And he's a Ukrainian Azov movement member. That's his picture down there. On the record, guys, you could prove this. And he was on video going, let's go in the Capitol in Russian. This was an operation very clearly. We've gone over this 100 times over. Don't forget. And I'll point back to something like Alex Rubenstein is doing this before I was covering it. Point is that Loomer steps into this right before October 7th and just completely hamstrings the whole thing and makes it only about literally everything but the Israeli and CIA overlap. And makes it about Democrats, basically. The point is this was always an operation, and people like her were put out to hide the bigger picture. It's obvious to me. But the point being is that how do we not learn from this? What's happening and how they frame that? And Ray Epps and all of it, guys. And here we are yet again. Well, my point is always is the people out there that know that, they don't care. The Dranos out there, they don't care that falling for the bait or whether they're involved or however you look at it doesn't change for them because it's about the agenda. You should not jump at this. You should not go to insurrection when they do this because that is exactly what they want from you. You all know this. Protesters breach barriers, rush the U.S. Capitol. Okay, let's watch that clip real quick.
We got people breaking through the barriers of the Capitol building. We got people breaking through the barriers of the Capitol building. people that are breaking through the barriers of the Capitol building, rushing the Capitol steps. We got.
Yeah, clearly. You can see how they're rushing, can't you? He's like breathlessly, and they're all walking casually to the stairs, right? And the point is, just like the other side, where people walking through the red ropes, right? Look, if you want to call that a trespassing violation, then charge them. I mean, that's the same thing with January 6th, and there were examples of violence that you could argue should be charged. Overall, the vast majority were not. In this case, people walk up to those steps and they sit down.
People rushing the Capitol steps right now.
I don't see anybody rushing anything, quite frankly.
Let's go!
So you can see, they go up here and they sit down in front.
Somebody get Brittany out!
Capitol Police are responding to the break. Capitol Police are responding to those who broke through the Capitol barriers.
Right. So it's what's called a sit-in, right? You sit down, you're protesting, right? Just like Ben Shapiro and the rest called them all monsters and terrorists because they dared to protest the genocide, or they called it an insurrection because they sat down inside a building, right? It's just lazy. If you're outraged, they call January 6th an insurrection, you're the stupidest person in the room for turning around and doing it back, however justified you may feel, because the Democrats, you're a child. And we're seeing that everywhere. Now, yes, again, trespassing, fine. Charge them if you think that's the reality. But that feels so ridiculously contrived. Ask yourself, if you were a Democrat, why you would do that. Doesn't mean they wouldn't, you understand, maybe because they're also stupid. But the point is that it seems like you're doing exactly what they would use against you. So it just feels ridiculous. But let's just say it's completely real. It's benign. It's basically not, they sat down the stairs and they say, we won't, resist. We're not going to get up. And this is, again, the kind of reporting you get from people trying to frame themselves as the new media. Nick Sorter says a group of anti-ICE rioters, clearly the rioters, breached the barricade to the Capitol tonight. Dozens of them ran through, storming the Capitol Police, locked them all up in the D.C. gulag for 2 years, because that's how they perceive what happened to them in a lot of ways, and the January 6th people, because it did in a lot of ways. But if you think that's only the Democrats going against you, you're blind. I frankly, my opinion about these people. Even if everything you think about January 6th is correct, you're still ridiculous for turning around and doing the same thing, which gives the government more power over people in this country, which creates the ability for them to claim insurrection when you barely violate the law. These are the people destroying this country, whether they care about it or not, whether they recognize it or not. It's ridiculous, and it's on left and right. Here's what the report says. It looks like it's going to be a busy weekend. It's the red state, by the way. We saw things get started with an early anti-ICE protest in various locations. Also, on Friday, there was action at the U.S. Capitol. People were protesting at the Supreme Court, and then they were leaving, and they allegedly pushed past the barriers, and police were setting up to keep protesters away. Sounds pretty benign. The way, CNN reporters CNN reported they were a veterans group against fascism. Oh, so now Nick Sorter wants you to lock up veterans. Does that work? Does that make sense to anybody? You have veterans who are protesting fascism, people that fought and put their lives in the line for people like you, Nick, however you want to frame that. And now you want them to be arrested because they did exactly what you said wasn't an insurrection? See how dumb this is? They don't care about facts. They care about whatever works for the agenda. Makes me angry, though, that people get used by people like that. Now, let's talk about the propaganda. Now, somebody made excellent points, and I thought the same thing in regard to the flag point and how you saw people, like, because they're stupid, they thought it was a Palestinian flag, for example. I saw many comments like that. But there's also the interesting overlap of why that was used and the interesting color overlap of both Palestine and Iran. Think about the interesting overlap there. The color, the flag colors, subconsciously, I do agree. That makes sense. Whether it was designed or not, it does actually make sense. You're kind of planting this idea. And now you see the Iran flag and there's a war, Israel is fighting for, however they're framing it. This was our show on the 10th. Trump's use of the Alien Enemies Act declared unlawful, because it is, LA's orchestrated chaos, and Israel's propaganda. And realize the Enemy Aliens Act is not about one side or the other. It's a textbook reality of what the law requires that has not been met, even if everything they say is true. It still hasn't been met. It's as simple as, it's clear as day. Now, this is somebody pointing this out. Why would ICE protesters be given green, white, and red Mexican flags to wave in front of cameras? He says timing and the similarly Iranian flag, similarly colored, would suggest that people are behind the protest want Americans to project their triggered emotions about ICE and immigrants onto Israel and Iran. Sort of like, how Israel fomented the hatred of people, the Rwanda genocide. literally talking to him before. I said, well, that's just like us and the Palestinians. I can see they're, using the hatred toward the other. And now you see it going on. And now, it's interesting. At the very least, a thought to consider. And since we're showing this, I'll shout out my interview with Shannon Joy again. We had a really good talk. Fighting for truth in a partisan world, LA chaos, and the impending lockdowns. Whether that's from another pathogen conversation or because of what's going on in the immigration conversation. She feels very strongly lockdowns are coming, and I don't disagree. Now, here is the clip of him about protests, which if you haven't heard, you need to hear this, guys, because if you care about your rights, if you care about the Constitution, which doesn't apply only to one side of the paradigm, then this should outrage you, because he is telling you if you protest today, you'll be met with force. Not if you're violent, if you simply protest. And then, in his typically ridiculous fashion, acts like he doesn't even know what protests we're talking about, even though he does. And on top of that, then saying they're anti-American, the protests he doesn't know about, but now knows they're anti-American. Or if you protest, it's just all of it's the same. It's frustrating.
Big on Saturday. We're going to have a lot of, and if there's any protester that wants to come out, they will be met with very big force. By the way, for those people that want to protest, they're going to be met with very big force. And I haven't even heard about a protest, but, this is...
How embarrassing. What a stupid thing to say when you all know, and he's literally, that's the impetus for the point, because this is coming, and that's why he's saying this, but somehow doesn't know. It's just his petty desire to act like they're irrelevant and doesn't even know about it. He was asked about it today, in fact, and they were like, what about the no? He's like, what's called? No kings? It's like, come on, man. Like, that's just childish. We all know what this is.
People that hate our country,
See?
but they were big force. And I haven't even heard about a protest. But, this is people that hate our country.
Yeah. So if you protest, so that's why it was so stupid that he said that. I haven't even heard about a protest, but it's people who hate our country. So without just accepting the language you put forward, that means if you protest at all, you hate the country. Who cares if it's your constitutional right and all that, or that, like, on January 6th, that was a protest, right? But so you apparently hate the country because you were at January 6th, according to his logic. That's just stupid. And he does know, because it's a thing he's been briefed on. It's an intelligence issue. They know what this is. He knows.
But they will be met with very heavy force. Thank you.
Yep. 3 times he repeated that. There's no nuance to that, guys. And now we're seeing it today. People are being met with force. And now we're setting a precedent. If you protest against what the ruler wants, sort of like you live in an authoritarian dictatorship, then they will put you in prison or jail, or maybe El Salvador. He's floated the idea of doing that to Americans 5 times. It's not hyperbolic, guys. They said it themselves. And on top of that, we have examples of veterans being arrested. This is Greg Stoker, a veteran himself, simply highlighting veterans' arrests have begun. 80-year-olds. Look at this guy with a walker being arrested. A veteran, right? So this should be pretty conflicting for people out there who are of the mind that veterans, Republicans, the idea that you have military veterans who you are supposed to be supporting who are being arrested for standing up for what they believe in. Does that sound like this country or what we pretend it's supposed to be? Here's another story. An American citizen who has now been arrested by the Marines, because that's the law, right? Insane. And as Rabble Rouser says, the U.S. no longer has a constitution. Well, I would frame it differently. The U.S., or rather just the world, will always have the U.S. Constitution. It's just about whether or not the people in power care to acknowledge those inherent rights as we understand. That's the reality, guys. Here's the article. U.S. Marines temporarily detain already. It's already over right there. That is a violation. But just the act of putting them there and seeing them, because they're federalized, and seeing them literally enforce the law with their shields and whatever else, that's a violation. Now, even more so, now you have U.S. Marines on the ground on U.S. soil arresting American citizens. Can you even imagine if this was Obama, if this was Clinton, if this was Biden, or anybody? As well as I, and rightly so, they would be freaking out. Nobody cares now on that side of the team sport politics. Marines deployed to Los Angeles temporarily detained a civilian on Friday. The U.S. military confirmed this is the New York Post, by the way, after being presented with Reuters images. So when they say, well, look, we know you did. And okay, fine, you got us. In the first known detention by active duty troops deployed by Donald Trump. There's just no way around this, guys. I'm hoping somebody carries out some kind of legal action here. You know, this is where Congress would come in with impeachment. Like, this is a massive violation. It's not about taking sides. It's about caring about the Constitution and those that don't. The incident took place at the Wilshire Federal Building in Los Angeles, where Marines took charge of a mission to protect the building. So right there, they're going to try to water this down at the end about how that's not, if you are protecting the building against people who might do something that is that you are enforcing the law. And it says, on Friday, in a rare domestic use of U.S. troops after days of protest over immigration raids. Now, I'm going to quickly jump ahead to point this out. We'll come back to this. Morale is not great. Troops say they feel used by Donald Trump's LA deployment. Now, there's multiple reports coming from this. People are talking to Marines on the ground, and they're saying, look, we're being politically used right now. Keep that in mind as we go through this. Now, it says, asked about the incident, the U.S. military's Northern Command spokesman said active duty forces, quote, may temporarily detain an individual in specific circumstances. Nope, false. Well, I mean, you could do whatever you want, but it's a crime. That's an illegal act. I mean, are we pretending like the Marines can detain anybody in domestic soil? That is a massive violation, guys. And it says the 200 Marines and more than 2,000 National Guard that are now deployed to Los Angeles. Now, I'm pretty sure that was more than 200, by the way, but that's usual for the New York Post to water down for their side. But it says to Los Angeles are tasked with protecting federal property and federal personnel. Right? You're enforcing the law. Simple. If you're going to pretend that standing there and enforcing, protecting is advising, because that's the only argument that makes sense, that they're there to advise. That's the way they sidestep posse comitatus, unless they declare the Insurrection Act, which is what Jones and everybody else are really trying to push, because then they can say that, therefore this won't matter. Like they're all part of this, in my opinion. The bottom line, whether they know it or not, is that the idea of doing that is not advisory. You would send one high-ranking person to advise them. No, you have hundreds and thousands of people there who are acting in violation of the law, period. And it says they will be joined by an additional 500 Marines and 2,000 more National Guard. Clearly, because it makes sense, right? Clearly, you can tell everything they're doing right now could be done by the police, without question. Now, it says the troops are authorized to detain people, even though it's illegal, who pose a threat to federal personnel or property, but only until police can arrest them. Like that changes anything. It doesn't. Military officials are not allowed to carry out arrests themselves. So what you're actually doing there is a misrepresentation. What you mean to say is processing them, because when you take custody of them, you're arresting them. So when if your point is that it only becomes illegal when you take them to a police station and put fingerprints down, that's insanely stupid. They know they're just trying to walk this away. Now it says the Posse Comitatus Act, which I'm surprised they bring it up because they know we're not stupid, generally forbids the U.S. military, including National Guard, from taking part in civilian law enforcement. And generally, it just does, okay? And that's exactly what's happening right now. On top of that, when the National Guard was federalized, that makes it even more of a violation, or more obviously a violation of Posse Comitatus. And I'll yet again include the actual law. You can read for yourself. It's textbook. The only two things they can use to sidestep it are if it's authorized by Congress or authorized by the Constitution, or an act of Congress like the Insurrection Act. Neither apply here at all. That's why they're trying to pretend like, oh, they're just advising. It's very much a violation. And I talked about it here. June 8th, Trump's Posse Comitatus, which all it really means is a posse of people you wrangle up to enforce what you see as the law. Now, even if you aren't even enforcing the law, that's the point. That is still a violation. You're not allowed to just wrangle up people or use the military. That's a very clear violation. Now, here's what the military is saying, at least in some cases. June 12th, National Guard troops and Marines sent to Los Angeles amid ongoing protests say their deployment feels more like a political theater than a meaningful national service assignment, according to the new Guardian report. Quote, morale is not great, is the quote I keep hearing, says Chris Purdy of the Chamberlain Network, who's spoken with multiple National Guard members since their sudden deployment. Marine veteran Janessa Goldbreck, who runs the Vet Voice Foundation, reported similar findings after among troops that she's been in contact with. So you got U.S. veterans, there's multiple reportings of people saying we're being used, which is pretty objectively obvious if you're not ridiculous. But it says among all that I spoke with, the feeling was that the Marines are being used as political pawns, and it stains the perception that Marines are apolitical. which I don't agree with in the first place, but it says military advocacy groups say they've heard dozens of complaints from service members about upset about being drawn into domestic policing roles, which is literally what they're doing, which is literally a violation of the act. And it says, quote, the sentiment across the board right now is that deploying military force against our own communities isn't the kind of national security we signed up for. Right. That's my point, guys. That's why even Republicans, I mean, just objectively honest people, whether they're left or right, are like, this is wrong. There's moments like this in our history where this happened. I mean, Iraq War was similar, where people just go, look, what's happening is just wrong. And we know you're lying. And then you get these kind of moments where you get momentum. And I think they're trying to avoid that right now. Now it says, quote, the overall perception was that the situation was nowhere at the level where Marines were necessary, says the veteran. Now, here's an interesting point. Despite that, here's what Ford Fisher showed. And I thought about using this for the image today. It says you're filming some protests and you have a camera with 20x optical zoom. Video to come. You see what that is? That is a U.S. sniper trained, aimed at Ford Fisher. A journalist who's just recording. In fact, not even, unless he even frames himself. Like, he really just documents. He doesn't frame it a certain way. He doesn't say anything. He just records and posts, which is a valuable asset to all of this. And I just think this is so outside. Like, if you have any concern about American rights, about what we believe this country is, every second right now, we are seeing examples that show you that that's dangerously slipping away. That's crazy. And he goes on to show you how they're trained up. They're aimed at him. And whether him or not, but that's right there. They're literally snipers for a protest, an American protest. That's the same thing Israel does. They'll point to those as the example for why it was bad. We even had to have snipers. Well, you did that because you claimed what was going to happen. That's how they use it. Like, they had to hide away in this because the protesters. It's like, well, you guys created that situation. It happens all the time. But I think that's insane. Now, on top of that, the Department of Homeland Security has Predator B drones orbiting over Los Angeles. They're using Stingray devices to steal information. That's already been reported. And these are drones that could do everything else we've talked about. I just think that's insane. Now, last point on this segment, this is Law and Crime saying, we will kill you, Sheriff warns about the violent No Kings protesters, despite I don't really see that much of that going on just yet, that police will be notifying your family where to collect your remains. Right. This is what happens when you embolden the might makes right mentality. Welcome to Trump 2025, or just U.S. government 2025. The sheriffs who are supposed to be there to protect the people are telling the people that if you do anything violent, you're gonna die. That's not a joke, by the way. Now, you understand that they make the argument all the time. If you throw something, their life's at risk and they have to kill you. That's pretty much only the United States for the most part. Like, if you look at other places in the world, there's a lot different ways they deal with people. Bottom line is that is an incredible escalation from people that are supposed to be there to enforce the law, who are simply telling you, we're going to execute you if you act out in violence. Just insane. Only word that fits it, guys. Now, Derek Bros points out, here's your list of sponsors for Trump's military parade. So meanwhile, as we're all distracted by the partisan divide, guess who's supporting this? Who's supposed to be, they're supposed to be the golden age of going away from the deep state and corporate influence. Everything, right? Except that literal opposite is what's happening. Coca-Cola, Walmart, UFC, Lockheed Martin, Oracle, Goldman Sachs, Coinbase, Palantir. These are the people who are supporting his military parade. A military parade, by the way, which is synonymous. The way that is being done might as well be China or North Korea. Now, everyone's trying to make this like Fox News was just gushing over it all day about how wonderful it is. Everyone hating on this are just evil Democrats. The point is that you can objectively look back through history. You can look at what that looks like and compare it to other countries that do that for shows of force. That's not who we have always been. But it is very much who the government is today, a desperate, vulnerable, cornered animal that needs to project strength because they're weakening every day. That's the reality, guys. The world sees that. And that's why these people are rushing in. What's the best analogy? These people are taking advantage of where this is. I think we're watching a simultaneous sort of technocratic, globalist, Zionist coup take place in this country, if not already. So let's talk about Iran and Israel, which I think is monumentally important. Here's what Israel put out. Now, we went over in the last show, or where was it? Well, I have it in there somewhere. I think it was further up in the show. Over this yesterday, we went over what we could see, what we could report, what we knew was going on. And the reality is, Israel illegally bombed Iran. They bombed in civilian apartment buildings. They also bombed installations they claim were nuclear sites, or any number of things, regardless of if every single claim they made was true. Let's just even say Iran was stacked to the teeth with nuclear weapons. It would still be an illegal attack. I really want you to hear that, because there is no way. That is the absolute undeniable truth, because there is no declaration of war. They don't have the legal right to just bomb who they want based on the claim that they think something's going to happen. Okay, turn it around. Iran says, or how about the UK? Because for some reason, Iran, they can't do anything because they're all terrorists, like just childishly stupid. The point is UK is an ally, right? So let's say the UK says, I have intelligence that Israel's going to attack us, and then bombs Tel Aviv without anything else happening. And they said, well, we thought something was going to happen. Does that seem like that makes sense? Right? It's the UK, it's a Western ally. Now, it's not Iran, so suddenly you start going, wait a minute, that is crazy, right? They can't just bomb who they want and murder people, or even if they destroyed military sites. That is a major escalation. That's a violation of international law. Every which way you look at it, but it's been going on for a very long time. So is the genocide, so is the multiple occupations. We are in like a these things don't exist right now, guys. The reality of international law, or domestic law for that matter, in this country have been ripped apart right now. And that's a very dangerous thing for people that believe we have some structure, which we can, if we can push back these maniacs. But the point is, what they did was wrong, illegal, and yes, they bombed innocent people, like they did in Lebanon, like they're doing in Lebanon, like they're doing in Syria, like they're doing in Gaza. It's what they do. History will show you that left and right. But here's how I want you to frame this today, which is just embarrassing, wrong, dishonest.
Been developing its ballistic missile arsenal for years.
Like every other country has.
Their 2,000-kilometer missiles can strike all of Israel.
Like most other countries can.
And the entire Middle East, with a payload of up to 1 ton.
Like most countries.
Their missiles, with a range of approximately 4,000 kilometers.
Like most countries.
Already put Europe at risk.
Like most countries.
Now they are developing missiles with an even wider range.
Like most countries.
Why is Iran investing billions in missiles that can reach all of Europe?
Like most countries.
Iran.
All right, so see how you add a little extra nuance, and suddenly it's why is that crazy? Well, because Iran, because they're bad. Iran, bad guy, right? Is that really the only driving force? The narrative of a group that's been caught lying 75,000 times in the last 6 months? I mean, my God. Because the reality is, they have weapons. Is that your only response? That's the best they can do, because the nuclear facade is already falling apart, and because it always does, because they're lying to you. So they just go, they've got weapons. So by that very logic, Iran could bomb all of you. I mean, that's just insane. But of course, it only works one way, right? Because it's might makes right, and we're in charge. That's the reality. It's right beneath the surface. People cheering this on want that, until they maybe realize that that's the worst thing in the world that will come back and bite them the second it turns around. But they're so short-sighted about the one thing they want. That's partisanship, guys. This is wild. Israel is showing you who they are. They always have. And your governments are happy to go in line. So here is a great clip that went around today. This is a former Israeli prime minister speaking with Mehdi Hassan and discussing the alleged, the what they call it, nuclear ambiguity. Only country in the world that has what that's called. And that means Israel, we just pretend don't have them, even though we all knew that they do, nuclear weapons. It's a great clip to think about. Dr. Simon Godek says this video on Israel's nuclear threat to Middle East should be mandatory viewing for every single member of Congress. I think they all know these things. They don't care, or they're blackmailed or influenced not to. At the end of the day, this, I'll go ahead and give a little end point that might surprise you. Avi Shlaim is in the audience, a very prominent Israeli historian, and he lays it all down that Israel is a threat to Iran, not the other way around. And based on every fact we have, the only thing that makes the other case is narrative rooted in lies.
Nuclear weapons does Iran have as of today?
Right now, I hope none.
Okay, how many does Israel have?
No idea.
No idea?
Note how the audience laughs at him. That's how stupid this is. We all know you know. We all know you have them.
You were in the government. They don't tell you that stuff.
No idea.
Who do they tell?
No idea.
Do you recognize the hypocrisy of Israel having a secret illicit nuclear weapons program that it won't open up its doors to and won't talk about, and then lecturing everyone else in the region about nuclear weapons?
Absolutely not. You know why?
You talk about hypocrisy. If an Iranian guest came on my show and I asked him about Iran's nuclear program, he said, I don't know, I'm not going to talk about it. Would you be okay with that? You'd be outraged.
Of course
and
I would
you
be.
sit here as a former
Of course
minister
I
of
would
the
be,
Israeli
because-
government saying, I don't know, never talked about nuclear.
Right. Just to cut it real quick. Of course I would be, because Iran are villain terrorists. That's going to be his logic in one way or another. He cuts him off, but just realize that it is in principle and fact, it's the same thing. It's a great point, right? If they did it, you'd be outraged. Of course we would, because they're the bad guy. I'm so glad for the first time, at least me doing this, as much as I'm seeing it, for as long as I've been doing this, that people are finally starting to come around, like average people, to recognizing that just because you frame the other as the demon, bad guy, terrorist monster, that it's just narrative, guys, and that the facts in principle are what should matter. And if you just dehumanize the other, which is what they've been doing for as long as I've lived, you create a body of people that will hate them for no reason. And they're doing that to your neighbor right now. He's a Democrat. He's the villain, pedophile. It's just silly that they're turning you against yourselves. And it's the Stephen Miller Zionists of the world that I think are creating that, in my personal opinion, like the infiltration overlap. But the reality is that they need you to hate these people. They need you to feel that they're villains and monsters when they're just people with lives and families and dreams, just like everybody else. And in fact, it's a very technologically advanced country, one of the most, in fact. And I was going to include some clips today. I did a great interview in the past about this, just showing you the average people in Iran, not some North Korea tour scenario, but like most Americans are aggressively misinformed about what Iran is, about what you can do in Iran. Like they picture some, all covered black women. That's just not the reality, guys. There is some cases that are more religiously adherent, but same in Israel. That's what's so funny about it, is you have all these examples of very Orthodox Jewish communities in Israel where the women are forced to wear head covers and nobody talks about it because it's all ridiculous and hypocritical. In Iran, that's not the case everywhere. They're not mandatory. Robert's gone over this a lot. Let me continue this.
Illicit nuclear weapons program that it won't open up its doors to and won't talk about, and then lecturing everyone else in the region about nuclear weapons.
Absolutely not. You know why?
You talk about hypocrisy. If an Iranian guest came on my show and I asked him about Iran's nuclear program, he said, I don't know, I'm not going to talk about it. Would you be okay with that? You'd be outraged.
Of course
and
I would
you
be.
sit here as a former
Of course
minister
I
of
would
the
be,
Israeli
because-
government saying, I don't know, I never talked about nukes with anyone.
Because there was like 16 United Nations Security Council resolutions against Iran.
And there is against Israel. And there is against Israel as well.
About
your nuclear
issues?
program.
No.
Yes, there is. UN Resolution 487. Let me read it to you. The UN Security Council in 1981 calls upon Israel urgently to place its nuclear facilities under the safeguards of the IAEA. Why haven't you done that?
Because
Iran has never attacked a neighbor. Israel has repeatedly attacked its neighbors. Iran signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Israel has refused to sign. Iran submits to inspection by the International Nuclear Energy Agency. Israel refuses to submit. Iran has no nuclear weapons. Israel has between 75 and 400 nuclear weapons. So Israel poses an existential threat to Iran. For the last 40 years, Israel has conducted a systematic campaign of disinformation about Iran. Why the lies? Why the double standards? Why the hypocrisy?
Yep. And you know why. That's Avi Shlaim, very, very highly regarded Israeli historian. I played the clip many times where he's talking about Zionism is racism and what it really is. I mean, this is the point. He's a Jewish person himself, guys. They call these things out across the world. It's about acknowledging the reality, at the very least, that it's not one-sided, as if it's only this and you're a racist if you disagree. It's obviously not true. But that's a very important clip to break these down, the lies about it. Or the UN resolution point's the best because they're so used in the past to people just taking the narrative and not pushing back. The reality is I could point out 75 more of those, even just since October 7th, but well before that. Many different resolutions from the UN that say you can't occupy the Golan Heights, so to say that you can't take the West Bank, to say on and on and on, and they just disregard them, just literally don't care. And I just showed you that the other day, yesterday, in fact, about them openly saying in their Knesset they can legislate wherever they want in the world, that international law does not bind them. That's publicly stated, their own documents. I'll grab it if I have a second and bring it up. I think it's just clear the way they see the world. I'll include a show or an interview I did with Corey Hughes on this exact point they're making about this was Israel behind the assassination of JFK? His work shows yes. And the point is that clearly the two main things were the Dimona Nuclear Institute that they were discussing right there, that they were required to show, but they didn't, and JFK died and all went away, or AIPAC. Same point, same time that he was flirting with the idea of having AIPAC register as a foreign agent under FARA. We all know that conversation today, and he got killed and it didn't happen and all went forward. And then they contorted it to make it look like an American company, even though you can prove that it was an Israeli company. It's all very serious and obvious, guys. Now, here's what AIPAC put out today. Israel prevented Iraq from having nuclear weapons. Oh, did it? Israel prevented Syria from having nuclear weapons. And remember, this is an American company, guys. Or obviously not. Israel is preventing Iran from having nuclear weapons. The world is a safer place because Israel takes action and is willing to pay the price that no one else would. John comes in and says, hey, Grok, how many Israeli soldiers were on the ground with Americans in Iraq? A big goose egg. 0. Okay, let's go back to that. Israel prevented Iraq. Okay, hold on. This is actually an important point, right? AIPAC is literally taking credit for what the U.S. government did, which was a crime, which was a massive crime, but let's just take it from narrative perspective, that they liberated Iraq, right? See, that's not even, first of all, it's not what happened, but secondarily, Israel didn't do any of that. But the reality is Israel made that happen. And we know that. But here's AIPAC basically pointing to the fact that they made the U.S. government do that. So they're taking credit for the actions of what the U.S. government did in Iraq, in Syria. And I would say, yes, I completely agree. But what's crazy to me is that it literally shows you the game. How can AIPAC pretend that they prevented Iraq from anything, which wasn't even the reality, because it was never, the WMD lie also came from Israel. Big surprise, just like Iran, and it didn't turn out to be real. They all were lying to you. How do we not learn from these lessons? The sad reality is they're proving to you right there that they not only want you to know they control the U.S. government, but that they will take credit for the lie they create through it. And then you could prove they weren't even there. It's just so transparent, the whole thing, that this is almost like a gloat. But all I want you to take from it is that they're admitting, one, that they were involved in those things, which we already know, but that ultimately now they're trying to claim that they stopped them from having nuclear weapons when we know they lied about those things. In fact, I'll play this clip right now. It's an important time, I think, to include that. The one just about Netanyahu and the wars around. It's Jeffrey Sachs pointing this out. It's an important point to make in all this.
Starts, and it's really fascinating to go back. It starts in 1996 with Netanyahu, who wrote a book called Fighting Terrorism. And the thesis of the book is quite straightforward and very dangerous. He says, you know, there's Hamas, there's Hezbollah, they oppose Israel. It's not good for us to fight them directly. That won't work. What we need to do is topple the governments that back them. So what we need is regime change throughout the Middle East. And he actually gave a long list of 7 countries that included Syria, Libya, Iraq, Iran, Somalia, Sudan, and Lebanon. And systematically, the United States has done Netanyahu's bidding for almost 30 years now, going to war with every one of them except for the big one that Netanyahu so much longs for, which is the war directly between the United States and Iran.
Yeah, well, look at that. Almost like that's happening right now. It's very, very clear. So here is a clip from somebody currently in the Trump administration. WikiLeaks pointed this out, but you should know this by now. U.S. intelligence, because I've reported this 45 times every month for the last however long, the reality of how we know, right now that we know, but rather that the U.S. government itself has reported this, but the facts very clearly back this up. U.S. intelligence assessed weeks ago that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon. This is in their administration, you understand. This is WikiLeaks pointing this out. Quote, the intelligence community continues to assess that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon. This is Tulsi Gabbard.
The IC continues to assess that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and Supreme Leader Khamenei has not authorized the nuclear weapons program that he suspended in 2003. The IC continues to monitor closely if Tehran decides to reauthorize its nuclear weapons program.
Well, the reality being the evidence shows they never had one, first of all. But the point is clear. I should take it back, actually. Aside from when Israel controlled it through the Shah, surprise, surprise. And then they did. Then they worked on it's funny how that's ultimately when it became allowed once they had control of the country. This is how this stuff works. And now you got the Shah and all these fake America firsters out there pushing to have them take over for the freedom of Iran. I mean, when that happened after Operation Ajax, which was the last regime change that destroyed the country and turned it into a despotic regime for everybody other than the U.S. Western elitist at the top, that was like the oligarchy that was treated like royalty. And that's what they show you. They go, look at how wonderful it was for them. It wasn't, guys. People suffered. And then when they overthrew that and took back their country, ever since they framed it as evil, villain, terrorist, because that's what Israel does. She's very clearly showing you, at least, I mean, how do you hear that and then not acknowledge that that's what this government just told you, and now they're telling you something else? Here, Ahmed points out 30 years of propaganda. Iran may be able to build an atomic bomb in 5 years, says Israeli officials. That was 1995. And I'll include this again, by the way, that we just showed you from the United States of Israel, the account. Netanyahu's Iran nuclear bomb timeline. It goes back to 1992, and every single year, almost. In 6 months, in 1 year, they're almost there. They'll have a bomb in 1 year. Every single time. I made this point last time. It's not like they had some operation. In some cases over the years, you can show they've assassinated their scientists, right? But more often than not, there's not some big development. Time passes and it doesn't happen. How many times, sort of like Alex Jones to saying we're about to be in World War III, how many times can you say we're in World War III until it starts to lose its meaning? How many times can you say they're about to have a bomb and before it loses its meaning and you recognize dishonesty? I think we're well past that, but some people don't want to hear it. Here's BBC News. Was Iran months away from producing a nuclear bomb? Well, as James Corbett would say, if a title ends with a question mark, the answer is no, usually. But Alan McLeod makes the obvious point, or the most important point. More people should know that the BBC's Middle East online editor, so the one involved in that article, is in fact a former CIA employee and Mossad collaborator. Certainly makes a difference. And there's the article right there that you can check out for yourself. The point is, no, the evidence shows that's not the case. Thomas Massey, going into the actual attacks back and forth, says, did the IDF post a video from 8 months ago and claim it depicts missiles launched last night? Well, it appears that way. And this is not the first time they've done this. This is a post from this one's the new one. This is a post from 8 months ago. Okay. Now look at the arrangement of those and compare it to the other one. I mean, I think let's be clear. They've done this more than once. They lie about what's happening because a lot of times what happens is they need to frame it as they're under attack. Not to say that they're not. They clearly are being bombed. But I think they use it in moments they want, and they're just lie after lie. That's what the Israeli government is known for. Now, aside of all of that, Simon Godek makes a really great breakdown of like the timing of all this stuff and how insane it is that we can't acknowledge who the real villain is in this conversation. So Israel steals land for 80 years, which is the reality despite all the screaming Zionists out there. Israel builds settlements, bulldozes homes. Israel treats Palestinians like subhumans, as well as Jews who aren't the same color as them. Ask Ethiopian Jews. They'll all happily tell you there's articles written about it all over the place, even from Israeli media. But then Palestine, and it's more nuanced than this in timing, but just to make the point, Palestine resists. Israel says terrorism. We have the right to defend ourselves. Israel flattens Gaza, kills 20,000 children. Israel bombs Lebanon, quote, preemptively, and occupies illegally and continues to kill people despite the claim of some kind of a ceasefire. Israel bombs Iran, kills civilians. Israel illegally annexes parts of Syria. And I did that, Syria, and then Iran responds to what they did, even according to corporate media. The United States says Israel's a right to defend itself. And then, of course, on top of that, they go in and say, you can't respond or you'll be a terrorist. And Israel says, we're under attack. The United Nations says, or Europe says, we strongly condemn Iran. Like, it's just ridiculous. The rest is nuance, guys. That is the action. We live in a very, very dangerous time where there's far too many politicians, for whatever reason, or if not all of them, that are just completely disconnected from the truth. Some of them because they're paid to. But of course, Netanyahu showing you how much he cares about the Israeli people. The moment this started, flew to Greece, right? Because that's what not cowards do, right? You get on a plane and you fly away and let everyone else, and by the way, shut down the airport. Not a joke. Shuts down the airport so nobody in Israel can leave and then flies to Greece and lets it all blow over. Does that sound like a leader to you, or does it sound like a monster? Meanwhile, commercial airlines shut down, which means no other Israelis can leave. How does he survive this level of cowardice politically? Well, he's hated by everybody, so it's not going to change much. That's just about power. I just think that's so very, it speaks for itself about who we're dealing with. Now, here's what Pompeo, this shell of a man, came out and said, that we may have events in the somewhere in the world, sleeper cells of Iranians, like we've heard this so many times over the years. Not to say that it's not possible. Of course it is. But yeah, I desire a little bit more than a CIA agent telling me something, sort of like the Sean Ryan podcast. How'd that work out for us? This guy's a manipulator. He is a very adamant, just like Bolton, you saw it in the last administration. They are frothing at the mouth to have this happen. I can't even imagine what Bolton's night was like after the Iran started getting bombed. This guy's a maniac. What he's saying here is trying to create the narrative that justifies whatever happens next. It's a false flag setup, guys. Iranians are in the country. Didn't we just hear that about Hamas or whatever it was? There was Syrians before that, or Mexicans before that. It's whatever they need you jumping in shadows about. Doesn't mean it's false, but if there's no evidence, then it's just narrative, right? Here's what Pompeo had to say. We lie, we cheat, we steal. Pompeo.
You were around in terms of large events, Jewish events. I mean, this sounds like we've gone backwards decades in terms of the threat on Jewish lives. But that's exactly what this is also about.
And okay, just to address the obviously stupid part about these false reporters, you're talking about the state of Israel. You understand? There are more than Jews that live in Israel. The fact that they only ever report about the Jews shows you the entire ploy, guys. It's just wild to me. Or the fact that that doesn't represent all Jewish people. Like it's only about people like they're bombing them because they just want to kill Jews. I mean, how stupid do you have to be to not recognize, regardless of anything else, if there's ever a legal retaliation, you just saw it. They just unilaterally bombed Iran because they claim preemptive attack, and Iran responds. And then they're suddenly the villain. Like, it's just so cartoonish to me.
Around in terms of large events, Jewish events. I mean, this sounds like we've gone backwards decades in terms of the threat on Jewish lives. But that's exactly what this is also about.
Harris, I actually think it's just the converse of that. I do agree this.
Sorry, I want to stop one more time. I have to point out, did you catch that question she asked? These are not journalists. She basically just says, Iran's bad and Jews are being hurt. Go. Like, that's not a journalist question. You are setting him up to feed the narrative that you want, knowing that that's why he's here. That's how both CNN, Fox News, and all the rest operate. Watch.
But we've gone backwards decades in terms of the threat on Jewish lives. But that's exactly what this is also about.
Oh, yeah, no question.
Harris, I actually think it's just the converse of that. I do agree this could be a very high tension, stressful, and indeed there may be an event somewhere in the world. It's not just the missiles or drones they'll fly to Israel, but the Iranian IRGC, the very leadership the Israelis destroyed last night, has been working in nearly every country around the world, including the United States of America, to plant little terror cells.
Oh, you mean sort of like Israel did with the pager bomb attack, or sort of like Israel just got exposed for doing inside of Iran? Yeah, would you please demonstrate the evidence of any kind that Iran's doing that anywhere else? I'd love to see it. I wouldn't dismiss the possibility, but I don't see the evidence. When you have evidence of exactly what they're doing. Sort of like when Israel says you're using human shields, and then it gets caught 8 times over a year using human shields, and there's not evidence on the other side. What do you do after that happens? Do you continue saying the other side's using human shields, or do you go, okay, maybe they lied about that to cover the fact that they're using human shields? Logic.
Across the world, Hezbollah was doing the same. So this will be a very difficult period. But in the end, this was not a reckless attack, but indeed what they did was decent and just and righteous, and will reduce risk.
Oh, it's so gross to me. They killed a lot of civilians. We'll get to it in a minute. They bombed an entire civilian apartment building. It's all on video. It's all recorded. This, like the point they're going to make in a second. You're right, Chris Cuomo. This is not Gaza. It's in fact, the idea that you're bombing into a civilian building with no response, with no premise, or no impetus, no starting point. You just bombed it because you claim they're going to do something. I mean, it's just egregious.
To the Jewish diaspora around the world, and for Israel and for the United States of America, a really good set of outcomes are in the offing. So long as Israel is prepared to finish the task, and as long as the world unites to provide continued deterrence and defense to prevent Iran from conducting all kinds of attacks, I think of...
I mean, think about what he just said. Where is Iran attacked? Despite responding and bombing in Iraq instead of Israel, the United States, when they do something more than once in the past. Where have they invaded? Where are they occupying people? Where are they killing innocent civilians? Where are they bombing children? Where are they starving people? Where are they destabilizing countries for harvesting resources? I mean, any of it. I'd love to see an example of any of it other than the abstract claim that they somehow control Hezbollah or the Houthis, even though if that was true, and you take literally everything of just the claims, like just the claims they say about Hezbollah, and you pretend it's all true when most of it's not, even then it would pale in comparison to what we can literally prove they have done. And the reality of what they've done is far more than that, just what we can prove. So think about that for a second. If every lie they ever told was true, they would still be a shadow compared to what the U.S. and Israel do every day. It's just that clear if we aren't blinded by partisanship. Righteous. To say that you murdered innocent people and say that's righteous without them fighting first. Righteous. These are fake. It's like Rabbi Shmuley. These are not godly people, guys. They're faking. Or somehow they're God. Maybe that's the point. It's okay with you murdering innocent people. And then let's be clear, we're not dealing with the same God. And I don't mean that from some Jewish Christian thing. I'm talking about something far more dark, because the reality is most people in most religions in the world care about human life.
Cyber threats that will probably be projected around the world too. Iranians have a great cyber program. So lots of vectors for them to respond. We all need to be alert and responsive and do everything we can to deter them from coming after any American anywhere in any field.
Right. So all he did right there is goes, whatever happens next, it's Iran. Right? Get ready. Cyber attacks here, bombing this country, anywhere in the world, whatever we point to next, just know that's Iran. That is how they operate. Now here is that point from before, right? So this is what Israel's doing, planting kamikaze drone bases that have been there for years in order to lie in wait to kill civilians. That's what's happening. Or the pager attack we talked about. Right? We're 10 years. Pagers that blew up 75% children and women. But that's not terrorism, apparently, because, they're all evil people. We just, we all know they're all brown, they're gross, and they killed them all, no problem. I'm obviously being facetious. The point is, there's no way you can make sense of killing 75 or injuring 75% of people, women and children being the 75%, and acting like this is anything other than a grotesque act of terrorism, a dramatic violation of international law. And that we shouldn't consider whether this is happening all over our country right now. I am convinced that it is. Planting kamikaze drones for years, which shows you they had no intention of dealing with them. They were waiting for the right moment, as we'll get to in a second, as Israel will tell you. We were simply waiting. Trump knew the whole time. And Trump will tell you, I always knew the date. Yeah, we'll come back to it. Meanwhile, the Joneses of the world are trying to tell you that they were tricked and Trump didn't know. And he comes out and goes, we knew. It's just right now is a very interesting time. Now, here's what James Lee had to say about this. I think it's a good clip.
Justify a war that nobody wants.
There may be an event somewhere in the world. It's not just the missiles or drones they'll fly to Israel, but the Iranian IRGC, the very leadership the Israelis destroyed last night, has been working in nearly every country around the world, including the United States of America, to plant little terror cells all across the world.
Charlie Kirk this morning, quote, "Keep your head on a swivel. Biden let millions of people into America. Iran might activate some sleeper cells against Americans. Stay armed." Does anybody buy this still? You see, now that it's been confirmed that U.S. forces are going to be deployed, the priming campaign for some kind of attack is in full overdrive. Kind of like how they've been telling us for 30 years that Iran is 2 to 3 months away from building some kind of nuke. The irony here, of course, is the country that actually has a secret nuclear arsenal. Look, I'm gonna be real. We as regular people have almost no control if our deranged warmonger leaders want World War III. We just do the best we can and be as loud as we can be. But at the very least, we should at least know who the real king, the actual king of America is, and who we fight our wars on behalf of. Godspeed to us all.
For the podcast, he's pointing to Netanyahu. So let's realize how obvious this is to people who are being objective about it. Now, think for yourself. Don't just believe that because I say so. I'm simply stressing to you how clear it is to me, and I think that's objectively obvious. in the point we're making, not that you can prove it's all or nothing. Like, the idea is you can see who's dictating these things right now. And he points at Pompeo and the same thing. Now, here's that clip again. So consider this in the light of what we've already talked about today. Rabbi Shmuley slipping and saying the United States of Israel.
States that must get involved in this fight in order to protect the United States. God bless America. God bless the United States of Israel. God bless every innocent person. United States of Israel. God bless America. God bless the United States of Israel. States. God bless America. God bless the United States of Israel. God bless America. God bless the United States of Israel. God bless America. God bless the United States of Israel. God bless America. God bless the United States of Israel.
Pretty obvious and strange. The United States of Israel. Well, what do you know? People are calling this stuff out. Microaggressions podcast with Charlie Robinson says, bro, didn't they teach you at Spook School that you don't talk about the false flag until afterwards? Charlie Kirk, keep your head in a swivel. Biden let millions of people into America. Again, saying millions, by the way, that shows you the reality that that's pretty much what's been happening it's not unique to this administration. It's always being used against you. Israel's involved in that. I've made that point many times over. Iran might activate sleeper cells against Americans. Stay armed. I'd love to see where's your evidence, Charlie? What indication do you have other than intelligence claiming, which is almost always wrong in regard to what they tell you, right? I just think that's insane. 4 million views on that. These people are manipulators. That's my opinion. Now, Noctis Draven points out something that people are pointing to in Texas, going, look, it's already happening. They're burning down the oil refineries. Now, maybe this fleshes out to be something more. He's in Texas. Here's what he says. Guys, LOL, chill out. This is not a false flag attempt. I live around here. This stuff happens a lot. And I lived in Texas for, 3 years? Was it 2 or 3? The point is that I can attest to that to some degree. And he says, this stuff happens quite a bit here, quite a bit. Houston and other greater Houston areas considered the energy capital of the world because of the tons and tons of plants and refineries. One of the reasons why it's actually unhealthy. But it says, we make everything from plastics to refining oils and many, many other things. There are some fires, massive burn-offs, which is terrible, by the way, the chemicals we've talked about, but leaks, minor explosions, etc. Yeah, he's right. Sometimes workers get hurt or killed, but it's definitely not an attack. But right now, the point is, online in this partisan fields, everything you can point to right now is being used to progress the agenda, which to me stands out as abnormal. So right now, there is something going on. Like, that's my opinion. But it says, from Texas City, Baytown to Pasadena, Texas, there are plants so large it looks like cities from a distance. So when I say if it were an attack, you'd know it because it's a giant bomb. They have fire departments, sometimes even on the premises of these plants, with many plant workers being trained as firefighters for this exact purpose. Tons of sirens to warn people, etc. It's okay. I'll tell you if we're under attack. But don't just take his word for it. Look for yourself. But it says, although I do believe there will be a false flag on American soil to help push us into war with Iran for Israel. This ain't it, guys. Interesting. I'll include this article. So let's get into, let me close some of these real quick. I want to keep that one to talk about later. Let's talk about a couple of points around the kind of propaganda push and the awareness of the U.S. government, but specifically Trump, but the idea that the U.S. government was aware and involved in what just happened in regard to bombing Iran. You have to be honest about this. Now, just want to start with the point about this. Alex Jones doing his thing, comes in and says, tune in now to learn why Trump was so focused on stopping the Israeli attack. I mean, guys, that's just insanely stupid right now. Like, you can point back to what they were claiming, and if you're only reporting what the narrative is they want you to think, then that's propaganda. You can listen to what they're saying today, which blatantly proves that's not true. Or at the very least, that they're lying today, but then the idea is that you're just taking one lie over the other. It's frustrating, because the truth is, it's very clear that the U.S. was involved from day one. That's what Israel's reporting. That's what plenty of U.S. intelligence. I mean, it's all, we'll go over it in a second. I have it all lined up. But it says every top military think tank and warmongering scenario shows the crisis has the potential to trigger a new world war. Oh, here we are again. Didn't we just make this point? Didn't he just tell us we were in World War III? My point is, you can always act like, you're overthinking it, right? The point is, to make a claim that you're in World War III, that shouldn't be brushed off like some misstep, guys. That's insane. You're making a wildly irresponsible claim that you're in the midst of World War III with Russia. And then the next day, we're almost at World War III. It's like, well, time out. You just said we were in it. The point is, guys, people like this use these things because it's exciting. People go, oh my God, it's like it's a video game or it's a reality TV show. That's mostly the audience, I think. The point is most people see through it that I think are objectively covering this. David Icke calls him out and says every day, Alex Jones goes on the air to talk about absolute bollocks. He's so deep in the Trump trough now that he either doubles down or admits how monumentally wrong he has been. So he doubles down. Trump did not try to stop this Israel attack. He's owned by them. Trump is a little boy in short trousers doing whatever his masters tell him. Now, you can disagree with that. My point is, I think it's obvious that he was involved with this. It says, this is your God, Alex. You said people must vote for him to stop World War III, right? So you have nowhere to go anymore. All you can do is go on BSing until you finally sink below the stuff, still waving your Trump as the savior flag. Who ripped up the nuclear deal with Iran in the first place? That's my point as well. That was Trump. Where do Netanyahu's weapons come from? The U.S. government. Why did Trump remove all restrictions on supplying arms to Israel the moment he came into power, which was the opposite of what Jones and the rest were telling us? They would all end on day one. Exactly the opposite for both cases. He also told you the Ukraine war has stopped months ago. Clearly not. It says, why did Trump remove all restrictions? What was that? What was that in preparation for, do you think? Obvious. And the $1 trillion Pentagon budget, right? Didn't we're reducing spending? Isn't that how it's going to go? Where is the Trump condemnation of the Israel attack? And a ban on weapons to supplies, right? I thought it was the peace president. Quite the opposite. He's a psychopathic bully, just like the left and the right, just like Biden, Obama. It's the same thing to me. Just like his owners in Tel Aviv, and you are his bullhorn. Sleep well. I agree. Now, I want to throw out there right now, we do have some weather. I can hear it in the background. So if we lose connection, don't worry. That seems to happen here too often when it rains. We'll find out. Oh, and I just want to include this this thread. You can scroll through it. This is just World War III, WWII, World War III, and looking for that. You can see it right here. Trump already knows we're in World War III. Okay, so March 28th, we were already in World War III. March 23rd, we're about to be, and you can go April 4th. It's already he's already stopped World War III. You see how silly this gets? It's all just whatever works. Now, this one was 28th. We're in total effing war. Okay, right. Like, I agree. This is escalating. I'm not trying to claim we're not. What's happening with Iran and Israel and the rest, my point has always been that we have met the metrics for what you want to call a world war for a really long time. That doesn't diminish the reality. My point is not whether we're at some serious point. I think that. The point is about people like this waving this statement when they want to get you distracted, when they want you to, and then waffling on it every 30 seconds. One day to the next, we're in it, we're not, now it's happening, we're almost there. It's constant. Objective people can see that. I just clipped these and pointed out just to show that to people that might want to see that that's kind of ridiculous. Now, U.S. quietly sent hundreds of Hellfire missiles to Israel before the attack. According to an exclusive report, most seem on the partisan side to ignore the platforms they disagree with, but I think this is an accurate report and has now been acknowledged by the government. But it's more than that. They sent weapons, which we already know. The U.S. or the Israeli report, this is Times of Israel, report from Israel, U.S. helped lull Iran into belief that no attack was coming. All right, there's so many examples of this right now. Here's David Icke saying, see, Alex, he tried to stop it, right? Here's the report. Israeli officials say Trump knew of the plan, which they could lie, right? But all the evidence together, it's pretty clear what's happening. He says, Israeli officials claim that Trump was only pretending to oppose it while greenlighting it private. Trump's own statements on the matter aren't so different. We can read it. Now, just the parts I think stand out. Read the whole thing, New Republic. It says, 2 Israeli officials told Axios, however, that Trump was lying and the president had only pretended to publicly oppose Israel's military operation to, quote, eliminate ballistic missile and nuclear facilities, which was reportedly 8 months in the making. So since he came into power, right? The point is that if you listen to what they've said, if you look at what him and Vance said right out of the gate, they were rabid about Iran. They threatened him with more than we've ever done before. He usually does that, but that shows you that we're willing to go to this point. So you can't pretend like he tried to stop it or that he was resistant to it. He was adamant about it. The only thing that shifted was a moment of pretending he changed his mind, and everybody ran with that who are just selling narrative. And it says, we had a clear U.S. green light, says one Israeli official to the corporate media. How do you deny that? I mean, either Israel's lying about it, but then Trump would call out, right, and say, why are you lying about me? But he's not doing that. Daniel McAdams points to a report here. It says, Iran now threatening strikes on U.S. military installations in the Middle East. Now, that's not really I'll show you what they're saying. It's the same kind of thing. And it's legally within the law at this point. I'm getting ahead of myself. I think he says it right here, actually. Yeah, so it's right. This is the point Daniel McAdams makes. He says, thanks to Trump's admission that the U.S. is a co-belligerent. Now, legally speaking, he did do that more than once. We talked about this on the BitChute podcast with Bruce Fine and Jeffrey Warnick. The point is the co-belligerent aspect, meaning you're legally included, whether it's because of funding, with many different overlaps. Bruce made that point that this is a legal belligerent. You're a co-belligerent, meaning legally speaking, within international law, they have a legal right. They could bomb you if they want to. And that will be within the laws of war, the rules of war. And so because he did do that, he says they are legitimate targets. I doubt that's going to happen. I don't think Iran is that stupid because they know it will give them exactly what they want right now. But it says, thanks, Trump, for putting thousands of American service members at risk for your obsession with pleasing Israel. What a patriot you are. It's a good point. Now, Ben Norton highlights this. It's just what Trump has said publicly yesterday. Donald Trump boasted to the New York Post, I always knew the date of the Iranian attack. I know everything, he quoted. It was a joint U.S.-Israeli operation. So the point is, you could argue he's saying that because he doesn't want to look stupid, but that's just as embarrassing, quite frankly, that he's willing to lie and look and be petty. The truth is the evidence, aside from this, still shows you he was involved, or just the government was. You could also make another argument that maybe he wasn't, that he didn't know. Now, that's going to make Republicans uncomfortable because you never want to admit his shortcomings or whoever you're, saying with the left and Biden. But that's actually more likely than you think with all this stuff going on with his giving the military the authority to take unilateral action without informing him first, just like his last administration. That is true. So think about that. That's certainly possible. Anyway, the point is, I always knew the date for Israel attack on Iran. Trump tells the Post, June 13th. It says right there, same thing. I always knew the date. Quoting Donald Trump directly, because I knew everything. He says, I know everything. I know everything. That's his actual quote. God, talk about hubris. But the rest of it just adds more. It's exactly what we're talking about. Now, this is an interesting point I want to make. We've talked about opportunism, right? About politicians, for example, where if they come out and say, Israel's committing a genocide, and even if you know they're only doing it to gain some clout with people, you should still go, that's correct. If you want, when you point to it, say, but I don't trust this person. That's fine. Just make sure you're going, that's right. Everybody point at that because he said the right thing. So the point is, get them and just average politicians, usually ones that aren't like at the top of the scale, who want to move up the scale, get them to recognize a benefit to using the truth. Because right now, all they see is a benefit to telling you the lie, a benefit to towing the line. That's what they know. Sometimes that aligns with the truth. Very rarely, but it does happen. But if we can get some of them to recognize, okay, that Israel's going to come after me, I will lose the AIPAC money. But if 80% of the country supports me, that's more valuable to them. So what I'm trying to say is that there's a value to leaning into opportunism, not to trust them or ever to do that, but to simply use that to show other people that this will gain you support if you lean into the truth. My point in saying all that is, regardless of what you think Tucker Carlson is, and I share your concerns, I very clearly do, it still should be pointed to. I'm saying all that because there's a conversation below that's like, how does she not know he's part of this and that? And she does. We've talked about it. Nonetheless, it's valuable to get to point out the truth that is correct, right? I think that's a point to make. Tucker Carlson called Trump complicit, it writes, in Israel's attacks and urged the president to drop Israel and let them fight their own wars. Now, my opinion is maybe he changed his mind and we should be open to that. I'm still going to criticize him for everything up until now. I'm like interviewing Tate, for example. But the point is that if he is just changing his tune because he's not stupid and he sees that everybody everywhere recognizes that, then we should point to it. But be skeptical, because we saw that during COVID, right? Where a lot of people, sidled up next to a lot of the truth and used it and then rapidly went the other direction when the next agenda kicked off. But it says the United States should not at any level participate in a war with Iran. I agree. That's my point. No funding, no American weapons, no troops on the ground, regardless of what our special ally says. A fight with the Iranians has nothing to offer the United States. I agree. Regardless of his agenda. I agree. See my point? I think that's important to highlight. Now, of course, here's what we got today. Breaking news. Israel officially requests the U.S. to join ongoing campaign against Iran. It's so clumsy. Like, have you ever even seen that before where they like publicly say, we need you to join? They never do. They just join. They're all on the same side. So for them to state that like at a press conference and make it all, it's very clearly meant to go, you weren't involved until now. Will you help us now because you weren't before? I don't buy that for a second. That's why I laugh, because it's like, it's ridiculous. And this is how stupid they think we are. And Trump just admitted that he already knew. And it's just all clumsy, guys. Daniel McAdams also points to what Matt Gaetz pointed out. And it says Curtis Mills believes Trump engaging in joint strikes against Iran is a trap, and the White House should reject it. So another kind of counter narrative to this is that Trump's being fooled. Like, so my point is that they'll do anything. As they see that the narratives are already falling apart, well, the secondary narratives to say that, oh, he fell for it then. He wasn't like, if you move beyond that he was involved and you see that he is, then the best you can do is go, oh, he was tricked then. But your previous narrative about a second ago made the case that he wasn't. But now that you can see it, well, then he was tricked. Those things don't make sense together. But you see, they just jump. It's just like Israeli propaganda. Either way, Daniel McAdams says it's not a trap for Trump. He openly admits he has willingly treated the Iran talks as deception to pave way for Israeli strikes. He did. Why, of all people, are the anti-war right still going with this ridiculous line that Trump is an innocent with good intentions being played by the neocons? Because, and I think he knows this, they're not anti-war anything. But he says he himself has dispelled that notion in regard to being played by the neocons, right? So the idea is that you're now trying to float that if this all happens the way that nobody wants, it's only because he was tricked. So they'd rather look stupid than criminal, as I've said a lot. Kerry Wedler simply says, no one could have seen this coming, except anyone who paid a crumb of attention to Trump's first term foreign policy and his campaign rhetoric, right? Obviously it's poking fun at the people that are falling for this, but come on, guys. It's obvious. If you only go with what they're telling you today, which is the last thing you should ever do with basically anything, especially politicians, then you're ignoring all the evidence, all the precedent, all the outcomes, all the facts. Now, you're getting this push, overlapping with the idea that Iran tried to kill Trump, right? Even though that is the most flimsy out of everything in that narrative, guys. You realize that was one of the examples that they don't even include anymore. Like the idea that somebody tried to kill him, or like it's actually two things. Some people try to overlap the Butler thing as somehow Iran, even though I can't see any evidence to back that up. But then there was the other ones where they tried to claim somehow connected to Iran. The point was just clumsily laying the groundwork to somehow anything they could point to being Iran going after him, because this is where they were going. Very easy to see. And he just talks about that. I'll include this, by the way. Somebody tagged this down below. Remember this? This was that Butler video that was so embarrassing. It was embarrassingly fake, right? So if you remember this video, which you can go back and look at our coverage on it, it was a video that was actually inverted and then altered. It was not real. And basic facts could prove that to you because it's on the wrong side. And, I mean, everything that the hat words are reversed. I mean, it's just so silly. But both Luke Rudowski and Jones posted this as if it was real. It says, you can see the bullet hole appear by frame, and they deleted it because it was ridiculous. But my point is they'll go along with whatever suits the narrative. That's just insane, guys. People fall. They are tricking you, is my opinion. But now here is an Israeli propagandist who says Iran literally tried to assassinate Trump. Now they're trying to corral you to go after it. If you're defending that regime, you're an enemy of MAGA in America, says the Zionist trying to control this country. This is so stupid. Iran ordered an operative to assassinate Trump before. I don't buy that. That's what his prosecutor said. That's not the fact. That's why he gives you a screenshot, welcome to Twitter files, and not the actual source material. That's not true. The evidence does not back that up. I mean, the second part's the way to say that. It could be, and it could be. The evidence does not support that claim. Here's Ambassador Mike Huckabee, who apparently is in Israel, because that makes sense, right? It says, if you hear Israel's no concern to the United States, remember 700,000 Americans live in Israel, which is not true. That is equivalent to a full house district, and more Americans here than in any other country except Mexico, which is a funny point to make right now. So by that logic, then we shouldn't be worried about Mexico, right? Like that they're on our side because we have Americans there. Just people, I don't think they think these things through. But it says Iran isn't just attacking Israel, but your fellow Americans who live there. No, in fact, they're attacking the Israeli government and attacking installations. The bottom line, we'll get into why Israeli installations are buried under civilian locations or that their base is under a hospital. Oh, weird. All the claims they make about everybody else, which they've yet to prove. We'll go to that in a second. But you notice the point? In any other country, Iran isn't just attacking Israel, but your fair. Wait, what was it? Oh, wait, is it the wrong one? Let me read it again. If you hear Israel's no concern, remember 700,000 Americans live in Israel. That is equivalent to a full house district. More Americans live here. Yeah, okay. That's why. There was something that stood out to me. He says here. Okay, so he's talking about this in the first person. He's saying, if you hear that that's not concern to us, remember that 700,000 Americans live there, which isn't true. That's the equivalent of this. And he says more Americans here than in any other country. So would he say here if he was in the United States? This is my point. These people rapidly go back and forth. I mean, I think, what was it? Mike Johnson just went back to Israel. I think Trump's been there multiple times. Bondi, no, why? It doesn't make any sense other than what we know is going on. Gen X Girl points out that's an exaggerated number. I agree. Blame, she says about 200,000 is more accurate. But here's the important part. She says, blame Netanyahu for putting the dual citizens at risk by attacking Iran. The dual citizens choose to live in Israel in exchange for stolen property. So they choose their country because that's who they're talking about. A bunch of New Yorkers that move there and steal land for Palestinians. And if you don't believe that, it's been documented more than once. Oh, did I? I swear I grabbed that. Hold on. There it is.
No, I'm from New York, from Long Island.
From New York. What right do you have to live here?
The right I have is that the owner of the house wants me to live here, and he wants there to be Jews living in his house, and he wants...
That's false, by the way, and they'll show you next.
And I got chosen for whatever reason. It ended up being me.
You are stealing my house.
And if I don't steal it, someone else is going to steal it.
So why do you live here?
Because
so that was him for the podcast. And a different clip. He's lying to the reporter right now because they know they're lying. That's dishonesty, right? They know that what they're doing is wrong, at least in your eyes. Which is important to think about. If I don't steal, somebody else will, is what he says to the Palestinian as he steals their home from New York. There's nothing moral or correct about any of this, other than your supremacist mindset.
I live here because it's important, and because not too many people want to live here, and it's important to strengthen this neighborhood, to make sure that this neighborhood is not lost in any future peace deal.
Meaning only Jewish people. That is the mentality. That is supremacy that even B'Tselem, the leading Israeli human rights group, will call out. Jewish supremacy. The idea that not even, and really, honestly, it's beyond that. It's Zionism. It's apartheid. It is racism. Because Ethiopian Jews are not allowed. They're not treated the same way. But you just need to understand, that's what they're really saying. They need to keep out the people. And that's why the nation, actually, I'll play a clip after this. And the nation state law was put into place because Netanyahu would tell you it's the state for the Jews alone. Any other place in the world that says anything like that will be called racist because that's what it is.
So your position here is a political position to keep Palestinians out of it?
Not to keep Palestinians out of it, to keep Jews in it.
And therefore keep the Palestinians who are here out of it?
No, that's not, no. That's a necessary evil.
Wow.
And they're not coming back into here. So whether I am here, whether I am not here, whether it's me, whether it's someone else, whether it's a monkey, whether it's a giraffe, they're not coming back into this house ever. I understand why they're angry at me. I understand why they dislike me. But I did not do this to them. I'm not doing this to them. And as I said, if I leave, I'll be replaced immediately. And I venture to think that whoever comes here is not going to be as easygoing as I am.
Wow. What broken logic? Well, let's play this clip in case you haven't seen it. It's a day for it. The reality being this, and Avi Shlaim, since we already showed him before, showing you what we're really doing.
Zionism is racism. Israel cannot be both. Israel is either a racist Jewish state or it's a democratic state for everybody. And that's what I would like Israel to be. I'd like a democratic solution, one state with equal rights for all its inhabitants. Your organization, Human Rights Watch, issued a report last year about Israel, and the conclusion was it is an apartheid state. And there are four major human rights groups in the last 2 years who issued similar reports reached the same conclusion. Israel is an apartheid state. So apartheid is racism. Apartheid is discrimination. But Israel is the only member of the United Nations that I know which is officially racist. And I say this because of the July 2018 nation-state law, which says the Jews have a unique right to self-determination in Israel. Unique means exclusive.
Yes.
It means Arabs have no right to self-determination. It means even if Arabs became a majority, they would still have no right to self-determination. So most certainly Zionism is a racist ideology, and it is largely responsible for the Nakba that has unfolded throughout the last century and continues today.
Right. And the point he's making is that they recognize that if they allowed immigration the way that the people, that everyone in the world wanted, that would ultimately reduce the majority that they required for their ideology. And so they made sure that wasn't the case. I mean, everything about this is rooted in racism. This is apartheid, guys. That's why apartheid South Africa was the way it was. That was an Israel overlap. It's not hard to see. This point I always make. This is from Haaretz 2019. A news station, a TV star rather, said on a public interview, because this is the fake narrative they give to the rest of the world, right? That Arabs are equal citizens. Don't you hear that all day right now on Twitter? It's not true. Netanyahu steps up to correct her on air and says, Israel is the nation state of the Jews alone. Says, you're wrong. That's not true. The nation state of the Jews alone. That's apartheid. That's racism. There's no way around it. And that's what Avi Shalom was just talking about. I'll also include, by the way, B'Tselem, an Israeli human rights group that makes it very clear. 2021. This is apartheid, a regime of Jewish supremacy from Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. All right. So you can't really call them anti-Semites when you're talking about Israeli Jews that are covering this. The point is that it's obvious what's going on and it's being abused. Here it is from Amnesty International, 2022. Israel's apartheid against Palestinians. Human Rights Watch, 2021. Israel's authorities and crimes of apartheid and persecution. It's all very clear. Over and over this has happened. But here's Lindsey Graham. Again, I applaud President Trump for urging Iran back to the negotiating table. That's the facade. In order to end the regime's nuclear ambitions, which even your government said wasn't happening, through diplomacy. And by diplomacy, he means threatening bombing you if you don't do what we want. That's how they see diplomacy. And they know that's not what it is. They just say it so you can lie about it. And it's avoiding further bloodshed. God. And it says, however, if Iran refuses the offer, which is do whatever we want or we'll bomb you more. I mean, that's literally what Trump is saying right now. I strongly believe it is in America's national security interest. He said this yesterday, to go all in to help Israel finish the job. Okay. What exactly is finishing the job, Lindsey? You talking about murdering everybody in Iran? Are you talking about bombing what you claim are the nuclear sites? Well, they just said they did that, and many of the bombs hit civilian buildings. So what you're literally saying is the U.S. has to support another genocide in Iran. And it says one of the benefits of this approach is that it would substantially undo the damage done to our reputation by Biden's disastrous withdrawal. Oh, so now you're using the partisan lie, like Democrat bad, so this is the good thing. Whatever we say, if we start with Democrats are bad, then what we say next is what you want. Apparently that's enough for people. If diplomacy fails, going all in for Israel shows America's back on reliable ally. God, man. I mean, is there anybody this stupid? Or I think just politically invested that they don't care about the truth? This is alarming to me. Times of Israel. U.S. says Iran would be wise to resume talks, denies taking part in the attacks. Like literally, they're still saying this in some cases, even though Trump is going, I knew about it. And the U.S. government's being proven to be involved by arming them by, like we showed you yesterday, removing their troops from Iraq the day before. Come on, guys. We can't be this easy to manipulate. Iran says talks with the U.S. meaningless today after Israel attack, but yet to decide on attending. So even then, see, this is my point about restraint. Do you think the U.S. and Israel would go back to a table with the people that just bombed them? Yeah, right. So the bottom line is that Iran is saying it's meaningless. They're making a point. They don't care. It's obvious. You're not in a negotiation if in the middle of the negotiation, one of the partners bombs the country. And then Trump goes, why aren't you coming to the table? It's silly. But maybe they'll still attend. I think that would be smart for them just to make a point, but continue to call this out. Now, Thomas Massey comes in with a poll just showing you that not every politician is a complete maniac. And he says, should the United States be giving Israel weapons to make war with Iran? Look at it, guys, 126,000 votes. This is what Real America First is. 85% said no. That's what the people want. That's my opinion, but I think you can see that even in even in MAGA circles right now, they're battling with other people in the Republican Party about whether they should be doing this because they're not stupid. They were tricked, I think, but they're not stupid. Now, here is another one of these people, a Christian, conservative, journalist, Yankees fan, Israel supporter. Here's what he says. If you do not know which side to pick, consider this, because, always two sides, binary everything, right? Israel hit military sites in Iran, and including other civilian apartment buildings, but we'll leave that out because he doesn't care. Iran hit civilians. Okay, and I do think that's true, but we can go into why that's the case. But see, when you just frame it as a really basic narrative, binary, they did bad, they did good. That's enough for some people because they're lazy. It's good versus evil, see? It's them versus us. You're either with us or you're against us. These guys don't know how to do something new. But here's what matters. We've reported on this many times. This image is actually from Haaretz article. And this person simply says, why are the IDF headquarters in the middle of Tel Aviv? And he says, are they using Jews as human shields? Now, you can remove the Jews part, but he's right. They're the ones telling you they only report on the Jews in this country, despite there being other people than Jews there. But they're using whoever is in there as a human shield. That was even written by Haaretz going, that's pretty alarming. Now realize they moved it there. They moved it underneath these civilian locations. How is that not exactly the point? But here's Glenn reporting the same thing. Israel in 2021 built its new IDF Supreme Command post in the heart of Tel Aviv, buried beneath literal blocks of civilian buildings, like legitimately beneath civilian apartment buildings. Like that's loot. I mean, that's grotesque. What they're doing is using you, and they know they are. I mean, Israelis have called this out. It's called the Fortress of Zion. It was deliberately placed so it could be attacked without seeming to target civilians. So it couldn't be attacked without seeming to target civilians. That's how this works. See, they know what they're doing. They're manufacturing the illusion that you're doing it too. Now, Daniel McAdams points this out as well. This is from Channel 13, Israeli media. Military cabinet to meet in underground complex this evening. It says the meeting will take place in a new fortified Israeli army headquarters located below a hospital. Like an actual current hospital, guys, which is protected from Iranian missiles. I mean, are we kidding? How in the world can you not see that's a textbook example of what they claim Hamas is doing? You are, and don't forget that we covered this with the Shifa hospital point, that when the original room and tunnels were built under Shifa, even Ehud Barak, former prime minister, admitted this on the interview with CNN. They built that. They built it while it was a hospital that was being used. Now, whether Hamas ended up using it too, let's not forget Israel funded them right up until October 7th. The point is irrelevant that it was built by Israel. And here we are again with them using a current hospital as not Netanyahu, of course, because he flew to Greece because he's a coward. But here's what Daniel says. Wait, Israel has placed its military headquarters under a hospital using Gaza logic. You get it, but they're not going to say that because they're not going to be honest about it. Here's why it read. Every Israeli accusation is a confession. All this is a video showing you, this is a video of them in the hospital. This is in as well as under. You have this whole thing going on. They're literally in a hospital. I mean, think about how insane that is with everything they've been doing. It's just saying, it's showing you hospital, and there's their command center in the hospital. And then it shows hospital beds. Wow. Just tone deaf, I guess, is the best way to put that with what they've been saying. And then they just publicly show that. I mean, or challenging, right? We can do what we want, and we're proving it to you, right? But here's Chris. I briefly said this earlier. Cuomo comes out and says, Iran is not Gaza. He says, there's no sympathy for the head of the snake of terror. Are you kidding me? I mean, again, the point is always, you can argue that they're doing this, or I think all governments are trying to do, if you compare facts around what the U.S. does in the world, what the Israel does in the world, I mean, again, just what you can prove, not what we know the full picture is, but what we can prove, and you compare it to what everything they say Iran is doing. Look at those two things. All of it, and it doesn't even compare. And yet they want you to believe that this is how about this? The leading state sponsor of terrorism, as they call it, right? The leading state sponsor. And then what's the supposedly leading group? Oh, it's ISIS. And who did that attack? Oh, that's right, Iran. ISIS has been attacking Iran since October 7th, but they're the leading state sponsor of terrorism, yet the leading terrorist group you guys used as boogeyman are the ones attacking Iran? And how many times has ISIS attacked Israel? Oh, that's right, none. Oh, that's right, they were treating you guys on and on and on, treating the moderate rebels in Syria. But we still pretend like this makes sense, right? And it goes on to say, that's the head of the snake of terror that sees you and me, unless you're an Islamist sympathizer, as the great Satan. You see, this guy is, I honestly think that Cuomo's not that bright for a lot of reasons. The pawn line is great Satan is referring to the government, guys. That's been explicitly pointed out. And it was a long time ago. But like, for example, when they say death to America, you could easily argue that some of them genuinely think all of us. I wouldn't disagree with that. But many of them have made the clear point that what we're talking about is the government, which I agree with. But when you say the great Satan, that has been clear the whole time. They're talking about the American apparatus, the government, the empire. And most Iranians, if you listen to just about anybody objective or people that have been there, most Iranians, weirdly enough, like Americans. It's actually pretty easy to find out. But these people are gross and pushing a very clear agenda. This is what dehumanization looks like. So to him, every one of them, terror, monster, Islamist sympathizer, this is racism, guys. These are disgusting people, either wildly uninformed or dishonest. Piers Morgan, and that's a different point, but important to point out, I think. So he's, for the last so many months or even like month, he's really been trying to press this idea that he suddenly sees Israel, right? No one's buying it, Piers. Nobody's buying it, but he's acting like, then why I forget what he keeps doing, but he keeps asking he keeps putting these same responses out that he has done in the past that got like a wow moment and just trying to go, but and like grandstanding against the people that he was letting speak over everybody before. Like it's lazy. It's obvious that he didn't just wake up one day and see all these things. My point that I think people like Piers they're people that they're used. So suddenly he starts turning on Israel. Okay. If nothing ever happened after that, you may think maybe change his mind. But weirdly enough, just in time to gain a little bit of clout with the community that's about to call out what's happening in Iran, he's Israel bad, then turns around and says things like this. What's baffling to me is how Mossad can plan a Hezbollah pager attack, right? So calling them out for it. And now this extraordinarily precise attack on Iran's nuke sites. But had no idea Hamas was bad guy. Right? That Hamas was, October 7th, had no foreknowledge. So he sandwiches something that's a lie in between two criticisms of Israel. You don't think that's on purpose? Do you condemn Hamas guy suddenly? I mean, come on, guys. Now it's my opinion. But I think what's really clearly happening here is the lie is the extraordinarily precise. That's not what happened. I'm going to get into it in a second. But he uses that. And if he convinces you that he sees Israel, maybe you'll buy that narrative. That's what I think is happening. Now, Iran has now said 60 people, 6-0. This was about 12 hours ago. Iran says 60 people have been killed in a strike on a residential complex. Now, this is one of the strikes. Now, let me show you. Now, these are just some of the clips, and this is RT and plenty of others on the ground showing you what you can see. Now, could anything be fake? Of course. Just like anything else anywhere can. But the evidence piles up from multiple sources, international and otherwise, just like with Gaza. It says, you can see toys, doll clothes. We were the first foreign channel allowed into Iran, the residential complex that was bombed. Iran says 60 people were killed.
I'm reporting from a scene of devastation in Tehran. I'm standing.
I just realized, even right there, guys, I mean, this is transparently a civilian building with children's toys screwed about. And the evidence clearly shows you that they bombed not just what they claim were military installations.
Devastation in Tehran. I'm standing on the ruins of what was once a bustling residential building. As you can see, this residential building has been destroyed as a result of Israeli airstrikes on Friday, killing at least 60 people.
Are we pretending that's a military installation? Like, you realize they're not claiming some secretly held ones in civilian buildings. They're claiming they bombed military installations. Nuclear sites. What does that look like to you? Or the one behind him?
among them 20 children. And according to rescue workers, 10 of the children are still trapped under the rubbles, and of course rescue workers are still working and searching around the clock for the dead bodies of these children to be found. Well, scattered around me you can see the remnants of everyday life. For example, children's toys, dolls, clothes, and whatever takes us back in time to our childhood. Look at this beautiful doll. This has been a plaything of an innocent child which is not with us anymore now. Well, the devastation of this residential actually building shows that unlike the Israeli claim of only targeting nuclear and military sites, Israel has targeted residential buildings. And this is the first residential building which has come under Israeli attack on Friday. And there are other instances of such devastations of residential buildings across, not just in Tehran, but also in different cities as well. According to official reports, as a result of the Israeli air raids against different Iranian targets so far, at least 78 people have been killed, and almost 320 more people have been injured. And what we see here today, the presence of the remnants of everyday life, as well as the presence of the children's belongings scattered around, tells a different story. A different story of innocent lives, and innocent children's lives are being caught in a crossfire.
Now, should you consider whether or not the doll, for example, was staged? Absolutely. I mean, ask every question, but facts are what should guide your conclusions, right? And the evidence shows you that there is many different examples of bombings that took place that were not military installations. But question everything, right? But the idea is that all sides, media, governments, every one of them are trying to cultivate your view, sometimes for the truth, because they want you to see what the reality is and they'll lie to you to get you there, sometimes not. So always question everything you're seeing. I mean, that should be 101 TLAV at this point. Now, here's another clip. RT, at least 60 killed in the Friday Israeli strike on Tehran buildings. Now, this one is not in English, but these are all included for you to check out. A reporter next to the rubble of homes shows kids' shirts stained with blood. You know, and this is the same stuff we see in Gaza. I mean, when you bomb a civilian apartment building, you're going to have civilian casualties. Now, let's end with 2 points on this and then 1 point to kind of carry over to the next show that we'll probably get more into. Now, this is Iran threatens to target American, British, and French military bases. Now, if you read the whole thing, this is generally, I mean, like, I guess in a slightly abstract way, what they're saying. But just like we talked about with Russia and Putin saying that, you know, should you arm the Ukrainians that are bombing us? What's the way, I'm trying to think exactly how he framed it. It was we could, or God, it was something like we could or within the rights to bomb those countries. He didn't say we were going to bomb your countries, but clearly could, right? The point is that that's simply saying the legal reality, and they would because they're co-belligerents. That's the point. But it very well could mean that you should take it seriously, right? In this case, the point is they know that these people are involved, and that legally speaking means they have the right to attack them. I don't think, and I'm going to say it clearly again, that I don't think that's what's going to happen unless this gets pushed further by the United States. That's my opinion. Nonetheless, legally, they do have the right. But what you're going to see is spinning this out into they're threatening your family and they're monster terrorists are bombing, threatening to bomb Americans. Like that's going to get used to progress the whole Fox News lies being pushed right now. That's how this is working. And I think that's very clear. Now, in no way do I want Americans or anybody else to be hurt. Anybody, not Iranians, not Americans. Clearly, if you follow the show, you know that. But it's about being objective about the facts. And in this case, ask an international lawyer, ask people that understand the Constitution, or rather specifically international law. The reality is that they have the right because of the way this went down, especially Israel. That's obvious. They are involved. Everyone knows that. Here is CBS News. Israel's defense minister. So understand this has been Israel bombing Iran and then Iran responding. Everyone saw that this time. There's no way around that. So Israel's defense minister, after Iran responds legally, says, hey, they warn that Tehran will burn if Iran continues retaliatory attacks. So if you keep doing what you're legally allowed to do, we will destroy your entire country. So they've just pulled the mask off. So, and sometimes this is what the Israeli ministers do. Just realize what they're saying. And they mean it. And that's kind of the threat to the world. That you'd argue that's one of the hamstring, or rather, control mechanisms through our government. That they know that should they push back, maybe they'll get bombed, maybe they'll get killed, maybe they'll get Epstein, maybe they'll get blackmailed. All of these things are actually happening. Just see where they're at. Bombastically screaming, we're going to destroy your entire country. So what just happened was a crime. Let's just say you think it wasn't. What would it be to destroy the entire country, killing all the civilians and watch it all burn? You obviously know where this goes. They're threatening international crimes. Now, Time magazine reports today, Netanyahu says Israel, quote, will strike every site of the Ayatollah's regime, so Iran, everywhere, in warning to Iran as countries trade missiles. So they're threatening further that we'll just like Trump does, really. So you shouldn't just assume he means it. But it's certainly a real threat, and they could, just like with Putin, the same thing. So when they're threatening to bomb and destroy the entire country, that matters. And it's belligerent. Now, this is reporting Israel begins new round of attacks. Now, this was about, let's refresh it real quickly or just duplicate it in case I lose it. I believe this was, let's go through some of the reports then. I think this was early today, so maybe like 3-4 hours ago. Israel begins new round of attacks as Iran vows destructive barrage. Now, the point is they were saying, we're responding. We will continue to fight back if you keep bombing us. Because really what happened was Israel just went to town. They bombed out of nowhere and started bombing multiple locations because they're taking advantage of what they think they can do right now. And Trump is seemingly happy to let it go on. He called it all excellent. That's how gross this is. And so the point is that they're going to fight back. Why wouldn't they? And they're being called terrorists for it. But here are some of the, let's go look at some of the recent ones since we loaded it. Israel hits defense ministry. Great. Oil depots, we did have that coming up. We'll talk about next. But hitting the defense ministry, you see where this is going to go, guys. Israel seems to be desperately trying to spin this out of control. And hopefully you know why if you watch the show. It's quite obvious, I think, that this is about destabilization and pulling in the United States, which is what they've always wanted. Photographs show heavy damage from Iranian missiles. And so, yeah, the evidence of attacks in Tel Aviv are very clear. I have that coming up. At least 100 people injured in Iranian attacks on Israel. Now, a lot of these, by the way, are especially from Israeli reports, need to be taken with a grain of salt. But same with Iran, when they claim what they're saying in regard to how many places or locations or whether they're military, always question it. Always. Let's see. One of these IDF videos. We'll go back to that again. Iran launched UAVs in Israel tonight. This is them being intercepted. Really? Oh, come on, gosh darn. I mean, it probably is, but you give us a green screen with some audio. These people are really bad at propaganda, it seems. But Newsweek reports today, Israel escalates conflict with Iran, striking world's largest gas field. Now, this is simply to show you that Israel is belligerent and they are willing to hit things that will affect even people that are supposed to be on their side, like Qatar, for example. Well, you know the nuance there. People argue somehow from a Republican, like U.S. side, that it's really Qatar that's behind it all. The truth is Qatar at this point seems to be an extension of the Israeli manipulation and works through them to fund Hamas and things like that. Point is that this overlaps with them, but also other people in the world. If you're bombing one of the largest gas fields, that's going to have repercussions for the world. Israel doesn't care. In fact, I think that's the point, to cause that and then turn around and blame Iran for it. Israel has escalated its ongoing conflict with Iran, striking the world's largest gas field and other energy infrastructure as part of a 2-day assault that had otherwise largely targeted sites and personnel tied to their armed forces. I'll put it this way. I know we can see the evidence that shows that they're bombing other than that. To what the breakdown is, I feel like it's still up in the air. I'm waiting to get more trustworthy reports and on-the-ground documentation about exactly what. And I'm yet to see more of like Iran breaking it down. Not that we should take it at face value, but it's important to look at both of the narratives and kind of try to find where the reality is. My point is, though, that I do believe there were sites like that hit, but all of it was illegal, irrelevant. Iranian semi-official media outlets, including Tasnim news agency, and Fars news agency, reported on Saturday that an Israeli drone struck Iran's South Pars gas field, which is shared with Qatar, where it is known as the North Dome gas field. The attack was said to have targeted Phase 14 refineries of the Iranian section, with at least one unit reportedly on fire, leading to a suspension in operations. It's also worth considering maybe this was meant to be something else, blamed on somebody else. I just didn't go that way. The Israeli attack marks the first of its kind against Iranian energy infrastructure, which you have to realize obviously affects civilians. No, they're bombing civilians, but these things then affect other, like this is, if you look in Syria, if in anything overlapping with occupied Palestine, this is deliberate what they do. Well, ask the Yemeni. They're starving them. They're attacking the Hodeidah port. They're hurting their water sources, bombing water installations, bombing energy. That's what they do. And then turn around and blame them for how their states collapsed. Oh, but it says also that raising concerns about the potential broader impact of escalating the conflict on global energy security and prices. They're trying to affect everybody with this. That's the point. Now, earlier, there was a point from the Iranian account that said something like, everyone will feel this. And they're using that to say, see, they're threatening everybody. And you could argue that. It's pretty opaque to know what they're really pointing at. But maybe the point was to try to make this out to be something that they were involved in, like that they're hurting everybody. I kind of get the sense of that, but waiting to see as it flushes out. Oops, that was one more thing. So this is a report about 7 hours ago, reports that Israel has struck a vehicle manufacturing plant in Iran. Now, these are early reports, so we'll have to wait and see if it flushes out. My point is there are a lot of reports and evidence coming out to showing you they're bombing, I don't want to call it indiscriminately, but clearly at least trying to hit civilians. Now, China, their UN envoy has condemned Israeli strikes on Iran. When the point I wanted to show you was really just, and also to consider that where this goes may not be, it very well could end up being that Russia, China, and others take the side of Iran. And that would be a very, very, very big deal. And that would be a world war scenario that couldn't be ignored. It says China condemns Israel's violation of Iran's sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity. It urges Israel to immediately stop all risky military actions, but it says China opposes the intensification and contradictions. I think that's important, and the expansion of conflicts, and is deeply concerned about the consequences that may be brought about by Israel's actions. So making it very clear that whatever spins out from this is Israel's fault, and that they're worried that if we don't pull it back, then that's obvious. Now, not to say that they're an honest actor. I question all these governments, but I think that's exactly, that this could very clearly spin out. And I don't think any of them want some kind of serious war. None of them want the Samson option, that's for sure. Now, this is another report coming from Iran saying an Iranian general says that Iran has actually destroyed 3 main Israeli air bases. Now, it says you're only seeing the damage to Tel Aviv, the main location, the main civilian, under the main, their main headquarters buried under civilian buildings. But it says because it's a populated area where everyone has phones ready to film. But it says they also hit multiple other military bases they're not telling you about. Consider it. That could be a lie, but, they will hide that if they did. Now, Robert's reporting as of a few hours ago, a couple hours ago, footage of Iranian ballistic missiles smashing Haifa. Oil refineries appear to have been battered, massive fires still raging, and power outages recorded, perhaps the biggest Iranian strike on Israel yet. Now, again, if this affects like global industries, you might wonder whether this was meant to, like a false flag in a way. Just consider all these possibilities. But Iran attacking these things makes just as much sense right now. Now, to end, a couple points. Obviously, as Bassler points out, how it started, how it's going, right? Trump pledges no wars during his presidency. And on day one for Ukraine and Israel, and then grows both of them, essentially. And today, Trump says attack on Iran, excellent, and says more to come. I mean, really try to reconcile those two things. You're being lied to, guys, and that's not one side or the other. The U.S. government always lies to you. Michael Tracy says it was only last month that Trump went to Saudi Arabia and read off a speech decrying neocons and interventionalists. Remember that? Which was excitedly hailed as a huge sea change in U.S. foreign policy, even as he continued to call for conquering Gaza, and is now doing regime change in Iran. So basically exactly what every other administration did, the narrative shifted. Gee, where have you heard that before? This one's interesting. This Ibrahim, I'm not familiar with the account, editor-in-chief of, it looks like an Iranian platform, says the U.S. gives the green light to the new Syrian army to target Iraqi militants across the border after these militias targeted Syrian forces across the border. Now, the reality is, guys, there's nothing new here. If you don't understand by now I'll actually grab this one. What's going on here in Syria? And actually back to the point of ISIS and what that really is. As Israel further occupies Syria, this was December 10th, 2024, Western-backed ISIS patch-wearing terrorists began executions. I mean, literally. These are new pictures that took place in Syria, and these are the ones backed by the U.S. and Israel. They were openly executing people, and nobody even talks about this. They completely have overtaken this country, building bases, deploying troops, allowing their own terrorists to just murder anybody in right in plain daylight. That's how disgusting it is for those of us that see this, that anybody objective can recognize. But now Jelani is the hero of Syria because they control, or they think they can, however you want to frame it. The point is, U.S. gives nod on June 2nd to Syria to begin to bring foreign jihadists, ex-rebels, into the army. So we've come full circle. We're back to moderate rebels, guys. Literally, the U.S. government under Trump is saying, yes, those ones we now know were terrorists, the jihadis, you can bring them back in the Syrian military. You know, the same Syrian military that we tell you is on our side now, that's working with Israel. You piecing it together? How do you pretend you're fighting jihadis when you're literally working with them in every context? Guys, I mean, it's just, this, make Lomer's head explode if she cared about the truth. The point is she'll just ignore it because she's supporting Trump no matter what. And her Israeli-focused agenda is to go after anything brown, apparently. So this doesn't work. So she'll put it aside. Or, I shouldn't say that because sometimes I do see her call out Trump for things that are more like, so it shows you where the allegiance more lies, in my opinion. But that's just insane. And it's not unique to Trump or the right. It's the U.S. government. Include that for you. And to end here, the point that I want to include, you might have seen this. Mark Levin made a big statement about how Elon could put the final nail in the coffin of the Iranian regime by providing Starlink to the Iranian people. You know where this is going. I've made this point many times. Iran cut off all the internet so that people cannot organize a coup. That's not true. Now, reality being there's a tax on this country. There's a lot going on. Now, I don't want to get into the nuance of it in regard to what, it's possible there's a lot of factors involved with what's going on. Just like last time, we proved this to you. They brought the internet down and blamed them, the U.S. and Israel. That's a fact. So in this context, I haven't even seen reports of that actually happening. But if it comes to the pass, we should very much question whether, just like with Venezuela and the rest, they bring it down to blame it on them. The reality is they've been trying to foment a regime change in this for, it's not even secret. So to pretend like everything happening of the fake revolution, like in every other time in Syria and Venezuela, is not the same tired ploy is kind of dishonest. I mean, it's like, I think the last time, who was that? I mean, it fell apart instantaneously. The last time they tried to foment the regime change in Iran, it fell apart right away because they're in charge. They're ready for it. The point is, he says, bring Starlink in. RT says, Musk hands Iranians Starlink as Bibi demands regime change. He says, the beams are on. Elon Musk. Here's what I said. What did I tell you? Starlink is a tool of war, a tool of regime change. That's why, they give you the tokens where they give it to certain people here and there in North Carolina. Right. But the 99% of it, right? Here you go. Here you go, Honduras. Here you go, El Salvador. Here you go, any place where in currently, a military focused agenda or Palantir overlapping idea. That's what this is. Every one of these locations we've seen is in some kind of regime change, a war. That's what these things are. Now, Ramus makes an excellent point. Ramus 234 says the question is, can Starlink be used offensively? I've had this thought in the past. I haven't even looked into it. I'm surprised. Oops. And he says to block or interfere with communications. Apparently, it seems like a valid possibility. And even Grok says could theoretically disrupt communications if misused. Think about that. So now wondering whether that's its entire purpose. Now, it gets even crazier than that. Now, first, just recognize that yet again, the deep state or the government or whatever you want to call the real power structure here simply goes, Elon, help us overthrow Iran. And he goes, here you go, and gives them the thing, which, by the way, they're paying for because he's a military contractor. So let's talk about some of these overlapping points beyond that. Starlink signals can be reverse engineered to work like GPS, whether SpaceX likes it or not. That's pretty interesting. Here's the article. It says, Todd Humphreys, the person doing the peer-reviewed study in this, or I think it's not peer-reviewed, but a study on it, offers to SpaceX was simple. He says, with a few software tweaks, its rapidly growing Starlink's constellation could also offer precise position, navigation, timing. The U.S. Army wanted a backup GPS system. Could Starlink fill that role? This is 2022. Now it says, for the past 2 years, his team at the UT Austin's radio navigation lab has been reverse engineering signals sent from thousands of Starlink internet satellites. The first step forward toward developing a new global navigation technology. Oh, really? The first step towards one of the parts of the new control structure? Is that what we're talking about? A new, you're always on the radar kind of dynamic? That's what this is. The Starlink system signal is a closely guarded secret, he says. Even in our early discussions when SpaceX was being more cooperative, they didn't reveal any of the signal structure to us. We had to start from scratch, building basically a little radio telescope to eavesdrop on the signals. Now it says this, if SpaceX later decided to cooperate by including additional data on each satellite's exact position in its downlinks, that accuracy could theoretically improve to less than a meter, making it competitive with GPS. SpaceX did not respond to comments. With multiple satellite passes, the receiver ultimately calculates its own location. I mean, you may not know that if you're using this service, that you're being pinpoint targeted. It says UT Austin's findings also highlight the possibility of deliberate interface with Starlink itself. Humphreys notes that while these synchronization sequences hold promise for navigation, the fact that they are utterly predictable and are used across the whole constellation as a security vulnerability, or maybe a flaw by design. This one, Starlink's secrets revealed. Researchers cut open signal to confirm GPS support. Says SpaceX Starlink satellite internet service can be reverse engineered to work as global positioning system, according to a new research paper. That's where it's highlighting, published by researchers at University of Texas. SpaceX Starlink satellite internet service can be reverse engineered as a global positioning system. That seems interesting to me. And he goes on to this, it's all the breakdown here. Oh, this was just a thread talking about it. I included it for just more people conversing about this. It's on space exploration. So the argument is people engaging here have more insight into these things, but not always. But it's the same conversation. Weaponizing Starlink. I think this is a very real conversation about where we how this is already being used, and whether this is connected to all the stuff today or just any field of war, they seem to deploy this. And I'll include this article, which now seems even more relevant. You can't hide. Elon Musk and SpaceX are helping U.S. intelligence build the world's largest spy satellite network. This is the National Reconnaissance Office, the director, literally saying you can't hide because you're constantly being looked at. And he makes the point that Elon Musk is going to help him build the AI that allows this to be possible. Look at where we are. Think about this, guys. You're literally telling you that this can be reverse engineered, or maybe that's by design, to be a targeting system. Are you serious? And you have the government working with this under Biden, by the way, because we never like to talk about that apparently Elon's also a pedophile deep state worker, but then became Trump's teammate. Or you can be honest and acknowledge it's all just the U.S. government and they all work together. This is wild. And as Alan McLeod also points out, cannot stress this enough, big tech is a U.S. regime change tool. He's pointing to the same thing, but making it more broad. I agree with him. Whether it's Palantir or the rest, this is the weapon. Let's not go back to the original point, by the way, that we included. We're going to talk about more. You now have Palantir. Actually, I'll include it since we talked about it. You grab that real quick. And Meta and OpenAI and all the rest of these people immersing themselves, becoming members of the military. Doesn't that seem a little bit insane? Where was that? There it is. Perfect. I'll include this today. Oh, I think I did have it in the links up there. Remember this, though, for those that didn't see the beginning of the show. Meta, OpenAI, Palantir chiefs sworn into Army tech unit as lieutenant colonels. And this is just the crypt keeper saying it looks like what TLAV and Whitney have been talking about is correct. Merger of tech corporations, the military, and the state. So coming back to the point, if we're talking about big tech being a regime change tool, if we're talking about Starlink and the rest of these things and the technocratic regime change, it's all deployed for a clear outcome. I think this makes a lot more sense. Now you've got people this is technocracy becoming real. They now have positions of actual military power. How long until we already know they're overlapping. Elon Musk it technically still is based on the arguments, but was part of the government. We're slowly watching this transition. They just took places in the military. Now, Mel makes a good point about this in regard to the using of Starlink. She says, between this new round of messaging coming from Israeli propagandists like Ackman and the announcement of Starlink now operating over Iran, because again, he did say the beam is on, pretty clear, in her opinion, Israel has plans to take out the Ayatollah, the leaders, and the primary leader of the country, and frame it as some kind of population uprising. I've already seen that. like Pompeo. They're trying to float the idea that they're actually revolting, right? That's what he's saying down here, that they stopped them. We can't see that they're trying to revolt against the evil government. Now, look, there are plenty of people in the government, in the country that aren't happy with their government. But as I pointed out in the past, those very people more than once have shown that where they say, yes, we are angry with our government, but we do not want you coming in. Right? They're just using the general. I mean, look at this country. If we're going to use that as a metric for what there's a problem, well, half this country always hates the other side. So realize it's not that unique. And the point is whether or not you decide then, like, couldn't some other country then use that narrative to say that's why we have to overthrow the U.S. government? Same logic, right? It's might makes right. We're the one. You're the bad guy. It's childish stuff. Her point is they're going to use this Starlink now targeting system, weaponized dynamic to take out the leadership and claim it was them. And they finally won for freedom. They've been trying to do it for a very long time. As she says, this was never about nuclear program. I agree. Is a squirrel? Same thing. Israel has decided to assassinate Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. No, that's different, but same conversation. 2, try to cause total state collapse. Unless Iran establishes deterrence in the very short term by striking both Israeli and U.S. assets in the region and eliminating top figures in the Israeli regime. Now, I'm not calling for the retaliatory, I don't want this to spin out of control. The point that he's making is that if they do nothing, it seems like Israel's only going to keep pushing further. So I don't know. I don't want to advocate for violence in any context, but I do think that what's obvious is you could see other places like North Korea that ultimately show when they finally develop the bomb, they stop talking about it. I think what's obvious is that this is going to be pushed to a point to where it's either breaking or bending. And I think Israel wants this to fall into war. I think that's transparent. In fact, the evidence and the rhetoric and the long-term agenda shows you that. Very important to think about. But whether or not they get attacked using this, I guess we'll find out soon. So I'm going to end with a clip that we've shared before that's actually in that article. It's just a quick little clip to show you. So keep bearing in mind the new information about how Starlink can also be used on top of what they tell you. Let's give you the visual image of where Starlink actually is and the kind of control and influence and surveillance that it's currently employed around the entire globe. And think about what that means. Not just for the U.S. government, but maybe for the global Build Back Better, Great Reset agenda that's actually happening, but under a Republican flavor. So we pretend it's not there. But thank you for tuning in today, guys. I appreciate your continued support for this platform. If you appreciate what we're doing, because we do this for free, we put it out there because we believe in it. Show us that support. We need your support to continue. And if you want these kind of reports to continue, let us, look beneath the video. There'll be links to all the different things you can do, whether Cash App or cryptocurrency or whatever else, or just the donation link directly to our website. We can't survive without you. So thank you for supporting us. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.